You've been carrying weight that was never yours to hold. Thoughts that loop in your mind late at night, regret, shame, guilt. That voice that whispers, "You're not enough. You're behind. Why can't you just be happy?" But what if I told you the problem isn't you, it's what you've been taught to believe? They told you to think positive, move on, let it go, but no one ever told you how. Here's the truth. Negative thoughts don't vanish just because you want them to. They dissolve when you understand them, when you stop resisting and start seeing clearly. Buddhism isn't about escaping life. It's about waking up to it. It's about training your mind to let go naturally, gently, without force. Tonight, you're not just going to sleep. You're going to begin a release. A release of heaviness, of noise, of fear that's been living inside you for too long. Through ancient teachings, through sacred silence, through the rhythm of your breath, you'll feel something shift, a softening, a loosening, a quiet kind of peace that doesn't need permission to exist. This is not just another audio to fall asleep to. This is a journey back to stillness, back to clarity, back to a mind that no longer clings to pain. A mind that no longer believes every storm is permanent. Remember, Buddhism doesn't promise a life without pain. It shows you how to stop suffering over it. It teaches you that thoughts are not facts, that emotions are just passing clouds, and that you are not broken. You are just waking up. So tonight, let go of the stories, of the shame, of the noise that tells you you're not enough. Let go, and let the silence teach you what peace really feels like. Are you ready? Let's begin. You've made it here, and something in you knows it's time. Time to finally stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. The pain you never asked for, the stories that were never yours, the heaviness that lingers even when everything outside seems fine. Maybe you've tried to bury it. Maybe you've tried to fight it, but it keeps returning. A familiar tension in your chest, a sudden wave of sadness for no clear reason, a restless energy that won't let you fully rest, and you're tired of pretending, of performing, of holding it all in. There's a reason these patterns keep showing up. It's deeper than memory, older than thought. What you're feeling may not have started in this life alone. And tonight, we go deeper into the karmic roots of your emotional pain, not as a theory, not as philosophy, but as truth felt in the body, in your breath, in the silence beneath the noise. Karma is often misunderstood. People think it's about punishment or reward, but in Buddhism, karma is simply cause and effect. Seeds planted by your actions, words, and thoughts, some from this lifetime, some from countless lifetimes before. Emotional baggage, the kind that feels impossible to shake, is often the result of karmic imprints left unresolved. They don't just disappear with time, they repeat over and over, until they are met with awareness, until they are seen, purified, and released. These imprints can show up as recurring emotional pain, grief that has no origin, shame that feels unearned, a fear that lives in your bones. It's not random. It's not weakness. These are karmic echoes asking to be heard. When you avoid them, they return. When you suppress them, they grow louder. But when you meet them with wisdom, something changes. They begin to loosen. Purification in Buddhism is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming light. It's about releasing the emotional density that keeps your spirit heavy and stuck. And the practices that help us purify are not abstract or mysterious. They are precise, gentle, transformative. One of the most powerful tools is the Vajrasattva mantra. Vajrasattva is the embodiment of purity in Tibetan Buddhism. This mantra, when recited with sincerity, acts like a cleansing river, flushing out deeply embedded karmic stains. But the mantra is only one part. It's not magic. It works because it is supported by intention, awareness, and truthfulness. Without those, it's just sound. Confession in Buddhism is not about guilt. It's not about shame. It's about telling the truth to yourself and to the universe, admitting where you've caused harm, acknowledging where you've ignored your own inner voice, where you've turned away instead of facing what was hard. The act of confession is an act of release. Because, as long as we hold our mistakes in silence, they grow into secrets that rot us from the inside. But confession alone isn't complete. The next piece is restraint, a commitment not to repeat the harmful action, not because you fear punishment, but because you choose freedom. Restraint is not repression. It's remembering your true nature and refusing to feed what pulls you away from it. It's choosing peace over impulse, choosing clarity over chaos. When you practice these three, mantra, confession, and restraint, you're not just healing the past. You're rewriting the future. You're closing loops that have followed you across lifetimes. You're making space for joy that doesn't come with guilt, for love that doesn't come with fear. Some karmic imprints are passed down, not just through lifetimes, but through families, through voices you inherited before you could speak, through pain absorbed in the womb, through patterns repeated so often they became identity. But identity is not fixed. Karma is not fate. What has been done can be undone. What was inherited can be transformed. Even in silence, karma lives. It's in the things you never said, the forgiveness you never gave, the emotion you swallowed to keep the peace, the moment you betrayed yourself to be accepted. All of it leaves a mark. But none of it is permanent. That's the beauty of karma. It's not a sentence, it's a system. And systems can be changed, not by force, but by awareness, by returning again and again to the present moment. Because this moment is where karma shifts. Right now is where new seeds are planted. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you're changing your karma. Every time you pause before speaking and feel your breath instead of your anger, you're healing the past. Every time you choose to be kind when it would be easier to be cruel, you're breaking the chain. These moments are not small, they're everything. Purification is not about removing all your flaws. It's about no longer being defined by them. It's about looking at your deepest pain and no longer turning away, seeing the roots of your anger and not hiding them under false peace. Meeting your sorrow not with pity, but with compassion. This is how karma is released, not in dramatic moments, but in small acts of truth. You may find that as you begin to purify, emotions come up more strongly. Old memories resurface, patterns you thought were gone return. This is not regression, it's revelation. It means you're strong enough now to see what you once had to hide. Let it come. let it rise, and let it pass through. You are not here to be punished by your past. You are here to meet it with wisdom. In Buddhist teachings, they say karma ripens like fruit. It may ripen slowly over years or lifetimes, or suddenly in a single experience that shatters everything. But even in this ripening, there is grace. Because when karma ripens, it becomes visible. And what is visible can be healed. Sometimes the heaviest karma is hidden not in what you did, but in how you saw yourself, in the shame you carried for years, in the belief that you weren't worthy of love or peace. These are karmic shadows too, created not by action alone, but by self-perception. And these too can be purified. How? By seeing clearly that you are not your mistakes, that the worst thing you've done is not the whole of who you are, that beneath the layers of story, of hurt, of fear, there is stillness, a purity untouched by experience, a part of you that has never been harmed and never will be. The purpose of purification is to return to that place, not to become someone new, but to remember who you were before the wounds, to live from that place again, not as a fantasy, but as your natural state. This path is not fast, it's not linear. You'll have days when the same thought comes back 100 times, nights where you feel like you've made no progress at all. But this is the nature of karmic release. It unfolds in spirals, not straight lines. What matters is not how fast you go, but how gently you return when you drift, how honestly you show up when it hurts. The Vajrasattva mantra is one tool, but so is silence. So is sitting with your breath when it trembles. So is choosing not to act on every feeling. So is listening to your body, to your heart, to the moment. Each of these is a form of purification. Each is a door back to yourself. You might wonder, how do I know if I've really released karma? The truth is, you may not feel a lightning bolt or a sudden shift. You'll just start to notice the heaviness lifting. You'll wake up one morning and realize that the memory that once triggered you no longer does. You'll speak to someone who once hurt you and feel nothing but peace, not indifference, peace. That's how you'll know. And even if the pain returns, you'll meet it differently. Not with resistance, not with blame, but with curiosity. You'll see it as another layer rising to be seen. And that too is a sign of purification, because when pain no longer scares you, it no longer controls you. Everything you feel has a cause, but not every cause needs to continue. You are not bound by your history. You are not fated to repeat your suffering. You are capable of change, not just mentally, not just emotionally, but karmically. You can leave behind what no longer serves you, not by force, but by freedom. And freedom comes from understanding, from compassion, from letting go. There will be moments when you want to stop, when the weight feels like too much, when you question if any of this is working. Those are the most important moments to stay, because those are the moments the old patterns try to survive. They rise louder right before they break. Keep going. You are closer than you think. Karmic purification is not about escaping life. It's about being able to live it fully, to laugh without guilt, to cry without shame, to love without fear, to rest without the constant pull of unfinished emotional business. Tonight, your mind is quieting. The old stories are softening. The energy of pain is being seen, honored, and released. Not because you forced it, but because you listened. You are not broken. You are healing karmically. And that healing, slow, sacred, real, is the most powerful thing you can do. Not just for you, but for every life your life touches. And now that the karmic weight has started to lift, something inside you is shifting. The pressure is quieter. The grip of old patterns less tight. There's a little more space in your breath, in your chest, in your thoughts. But even as you soften into this relief, a deeper question rises. What am I without all this pain? Without the fear, the shame, the guilt I've carried for so long? What's left of me? This is where many people get stuck. When we release the story, we fear we'll disappear with it. The negative identities we wear, I'm broken, I'm not good enough, I always mess things up, feel familiar. They give us something to hold. But that something has also been hurting us. And now it's time to meet what lies beneath. At the heart of Buddhist wisdom is a simple, powerful truth. Everything you think you are is not what you really are. This is not meant to confuse or discourage. It's meant to free. Because the version of you that feels defined by shame, shaped by regret, paralyzed by fear, that version is a misunderstanding. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. And you are certainly not the painful stories you've repeated in your mind. In Buddhism, this truth is expressed through the teaching of shunyata, emptiness. Not emptiness as in nothingness, not a void, but emptiness in the sense that things, including your identity, do not exist independently, permanently, or in the way you believe they do. Everything arises in relationship. Everything is conditioned. Nothing is fixed. You might feel sadness and say, I am sad, but that's not quite true. Sadness arises. It stays for a time. Then it fades. It is an experience, not a definition. The more closely you observe your emotions, the more you see this. They appear, they change, and they disappear. They are not you. They are happening to you, yes, but they are not your core. And when you stop clinging to emotions as personal or permanent, something amazing happens. They lose their power to control you. Shame may still arise, but it doesn't take over. Guilt may knock at the door, but it doesn't move in. You begin to see these experiences like clouds in the sky, passing shapes, not the sky itself. This is what freedom looks like. The concept of I is something we build. From childhood, we collect ideas. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm a failure, I'm a success. Every label sticks. Every wound adds a layer. Over time, we forget that these are labels at all. We believe them to be the truth. But what Buddhism reveals is that there is no solid I behind those labels. No fixed identity holding it all together. It's a bundle of memories, emotions, thoughts, and reactions, and all of them are always changing. This doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you don't exist in the way you've assumed. The feeling of I is strong. It feels real. But when you look closely, it's hard to find. Where is it? In your thoughts. Those change every moment. In your body. That's changed since the day you were born. In your name, That was given to you. What you find, when you really search, is that you are not a thing. You are a process. This realization doesn't make you vanish. It makes your suffering vanish. Because most suffering is rooted in clinging to a fixed identity. If you believe, I am unlovable, every experience gets filtered through that belief. Someone cancels plans, proof. A relationship ends, more proof. But what if that identity was never solid to begin with? What if it was just a passing idea you held for too long? By understanding emptiness, you begin to hold your identity more lightly. You can say, I feel unlovable right now, instead of, I am unlovable. That small shift is everything. It's the doorway from prison to freedom. In daily life, this teaching helps in the moments you least expect. When anger arises and you pause, noticing it as a wave, not your identity. When guilt shows up and you see it as a conditioned pattern, not your truth. When sadness visits and you sit with it, not fighting it, not becoming it, just observing. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It's warmth. It's a clear seeing that leads to deep compassion. You realize that you've been hurting not because life is cruel, but because you've believed your pain was who you are. Now, you're learning that who you are is the one who observes. The awareness beneath the emotion. The space in which all things come and go. There's a saying in Buddhist texts, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. This means that even the most solid-looking things, your body, your thoughts, your emotions, are made of parts, conditions, causes. When the conditions change, the form changes. When the causes stop, the emotion fades. Nothing stands alone. Nothing stays forever. Even your guilt has conditions. Maybe it was born from something you did or something you didn't do. But now it's being fed by memory, by fear, by a belief that you are your past. Cut off the fuel and the guilt fades. Not by denial, but by understanding. Shame is similar. It tells you, you are wrong. Not just, you did something wrong, but you are wrong. That's a heavy burden. But when you bring emptiness into that feeling, you see the shame for what it is. A thought, a reaction, a distortion, not the truth. And once you see that clearly, it begins to lose its grip. Resentment works the same way. It sticks when you believe, they hurt me, and that hurt is now part of me. But through emptiness, you begin to see, the hurt is not your identity. The past is not a prison. You may still remember the pain, but you don't build a home inside it. You see the story, but you don't become it. Some people fear that seeing everything as empty will make life meaningless. But the opposite is true. It makes life sacred, precious. Because when you see that everything is changing, you start paying attention. You stop holding grudges. You stop clinging. You love more honestly. You forgive more quickly. You see that nothing, not even your worst moment, defines you. In practice, how do you begin to understand emptiness? Start with curiosity. Instead of believing every thought, question it. Is this true? Is this feeling permanent? Where is this me that's so certain it's not enough? Don't rush to answer. Just look. Look gently. Look honestly. Meditation is the training ground. You sit, thoughts come, Feelings rise, and you just watch. Over time, the mind stops clinging so hard. The identity starts softening, and a quiet wisdom appears, the kind that doesn't need to shout or prove, the kind that sees through illusion. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you act from clarity, not reactivity. You set boundaries not because you're angry, but because you see the pattern and choose peace. You make choices not from fear, but from alignment with truth. This is the power of emptiness. It doesn't erase you, it refines you. And as you deepen this understanding, life begins to feel less heavy. You carry your history more lightly. You hold your emotions more kindly. You stop chasing happiness and start embodying peace, because peace isn't something you create. It's what remains when false identities fall away. The ego will resist this. It wants something to hold, a name, a role, a wound. But you're not here to be a collection of pain stories. You're here to be free. And emptiness is freedom, not from life, but into life. Fully awake, fully alive, unbound. The teachings of emptiness are not for monks alone. They are for you, right here, lying down, heart open, mind softening. Let the old names fall away. Let the noise lose its meaning. You don't need to fix yourself. You only need to see clearly. You are not your thoughts. You are not your shame. You are not your history. You are the awareness that sees all things rise and fall and does not cling. Rest there now. The world may spin. Thoughts may come and go. But you are steady, quiet, free. Let the silence show you what's left when you stop believing the voice that says, "You are not enough." That voice was never you, and now it's time to let it go. So now you've started to see through the layers, the false stories, the identities that were never real. The emotions that once felt permanent are now seen as waves, rising and falling in the vast space of awareness. And with this space comes a question that many avoid. What about the parts of myself I've rejected? The ones I pretend don't exist? They still live inside you, don't they? Tucked away in silence, buried in the body, avoided in the mind. They surface sometimes, in anger you can't explain, sadness that feels too deep, or numbness that shields you from it all. These are the hidden parts, the forgotten pieces of your inner life, the shadow self, the aspects of you that were unloved, unwanted, judged, or misunderstood. Maybe you were told not to cry. Maybe you were punished for speaking up. Maybe your sensitivity was called weakness. Over time, you learned to push these parts down, to disown them, to pretend they never existed. But nothing inside you truly disappears. What you bury will find another way to speak. It might speak through anxiety. It might speak through shame. It might speak through a subtle unease that follows you into every room. These signals are not signs that something's wrong with you. They're invitations to listen more deeply. This is where the practice of Tonglen begins. Tonglen is not about fixing. It's not about replacing negativity with positivity. It's about going toward the very thing you've spent your life running from. It's about meeting suffering, yours and others, with the one thing it never had enough of: compassion. In most of life, we're taught to avoid pain, push it away, numb it, ignore it. Tonglen turns that pattern upside down. It asks you to breathe in suffering, not as punishment, but as an act of courage. And then to breathe out healing, relief, understanding. It is one of the most direct, fearless practices in all of Tibetan Buddhism, and one of the most transformative. Here's how it works. You sit, you soften, you become present. Then you bring to mind a specific pain. It might be grief, or fear, or the part of yourself that you still feel ashamed of. Instead of turning away, you turn toward it. On your in-breath, you breathe in the raw, full feeling of that pain. You don't resist. You don't analyze. You allow yourself to feel it, not to suffer, but to hold it consciously. And then, on your out-breath, you offer it love. You offer it space. You offer it the exact thing it was missing when it first formed. This is not imagination. This is alchemy. You're learning to transmute darkness into light, not by denying it, but by integrating it. What makes Tonglen powerful is that you are not pushing pain away. You are transforming your relationship to it. You are becoming a vessel through which compassion flows into the places that need it most. The parts you disowned begin to feel seen. The inner child you silenced begins to feel safe. The patterns that seemed fixed begin to loosen. At first, this may feel backwards. Breathing in suffering sounds like the opposite of what we want. But the truth is, you've already been carrying that suffering. Tonglen just brings it into the light. It allows you to stop fighting what's already inside and meet it with care instead. As the practice deepens, you can expand your focus. Start with your own pain, but then begin to connect it to others. If you're holding loneliness, know that millions of others feel the same right now. Breathe it in, all of it, the collective ache, the universal grief, and then breathe out peace, not just for yourself, but for everyone who suffers in the same way. You begin to feel connected, not just to your own healing, but to the healing of the world. Tonglen dissolves the illusion of separation. It shows you that your suffering is not private, not isolated, not something to hide. It is shared. It is human. And when you breathe through it, not around it, you begin to feel a strength that's rooted in softness, not control. A strength that can hold anything, even your darkest emotions, without breaking. This practice is also a mirror. It reflects how you treat your inner life. When you flinch from discomfort, Tonglen shows you how to stay. When you judge yourself, Tonglen teaches you to forgive. When you feel helpless, Tonglen reminds you that compassion is always within reach. One of the most healing aspects of Tonglen is that it allows you to hold space for contradictions. You can feel sadness and still offer kindness. You can feel rage and still breathe love. You can be afraid and still remain open. This is not bypassing emotion. It's embracing it with such honesty that it begins to shift on its own. As you practice more, you may notice that certain memories rise. Moments when you felt rejected, abandoned, humiliated. These are not distractions. They are doors. Breathe them in. Let yourself touch that old pain without collapsing into it. On the out-breath, offer your past self what no one else could at that time: comfort, warmth, presence. This is how the shadow softens, not by being exiled, but by being welcomed. Tonglen also reveals the layers of your resistance. You may notice a voice inside that says, I don't want to feel this. I can't handle this. This is too much. That voice is part of the shadow too. It's not the enemy. It's a defense, a pattern that developed to protect you. But now you're capable of holding more. You can breathe with fear instead of obeying it. You can sit with sorrow without sinking. And over time, something beautiful begins to happen. The parts of you that once felt shameful start to become sacred. Not because they're ideal, but because they've been met, tended to, heard. In this space of deep compassion, nothing needs to be fixed. Everything needs to be loved. Tonglen also sharpens your sensitivity. You start to notice subtle forms of pain in others, the quiet suffering behind a friend's smile, the tension in a stranger's body. Instead of turning away, your heart opens. You breathe it in, not to carry their burden, but to meet it with care. You begin to realize that compassion isn't just a feeling, it's a practice, a choice, a skill you can develop every day. It also dissolves judgment. When you breathe in the anger of someone else, you begin to see that beneath it is hurt. When you take in someone's defensiveness, you sense their fear. This doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior, but it does mean you stop hardening your heart. You stay open without becoming weak. Tonglen also rewires your nervous system. It teaches you how to remain grounded in the face of emotional intensity. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of bracing, you breathe. And this changes how you relate to your own thoughts, to your memories, to your past. The most profound healing often happens in silence, in the quiet moment when you stop fighting what's inside and simply sit with it. Breathe it in, let it exist, and breathe out the love you once withheld. This is not fantasy. This is how you become whole. You don't need to understand every emotion to heal it. You just need to stop turning away. Tonglen is that act of turning toward. It says, I see you, I feel you, and I will not abandon you, again and again, breath by breath. Through this practice, the shadow becomes less frightening, because you no longer fear your own darkness. You meet it like an old friend who's been waiting. And in that meeting, something transforms, not just inside you, but around you. The world feels softer, people feel closer, and the pain that once defined you begins to feel like one part of a much larger story. A story that's still unfolding. Tonglen gives you back your power, not through control, but through compassion. And that power doesn't shout, it doesn't force, it simply remains steady, kind, willing to feel. Keep breathing. The parts of you that were once exiled are listening now, and they are ready to come home. You've already taken powerful steps. You've met your shadow with compassion. You've stopped running from the parts of yourself that once felt too heavy to hold. You've breathed in suffering and breathed out light. But now there's something even more subtle, more constant, and just as powerful, shaping your life moment by moment. Your words. Not just the words you speak out loud, but the ones no one else hears. The words you whisper to yourself when no one is watching. The silent judgments, the casual cruelty, the inner dialogue you've gotten used to, even when it hurts. The way you speak to yourself becomes the air you live in, and if that speech is harsh, your world becomes harsh. If that speech is poisoned by self-hate, fear, or criticism, You breathe that poison every day without realizing it. Most people underestimate the power of language, but in Buddhism, speech is sacred. It's not just communication, it's karma in motion. Every word shapes your mind. Every sentence reinforces a belief. Speech carries intention. It carves grooves in the heart. It builds the inner world you live in. The Buddha understood this deeply. That's why right speech is one of the 8 pillars of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's not a suggestion, it's a foundation. Because without purifying speech, both inner and outer, no other practice can take root fully. The mind may meditate, the body may sit still, but if the mouth speaks harm, the heart cannot rest. To cleanse internal negativity, you must first learn to hear yourself clearly. Not just what you say to others, but how you speak to yourself when you fail, when you feel afraid, when you feel unworthy. Do you respond with kindness, or do you attack yourself with the sharpest words? This self-talk becomes a habit, a script, and if it's filled with blame or shame, you start living inside a narrative where nothing is ever good enough, not even you. This is where mindful speech begins. It starts by listening, observing the automatic thoughts that come up when something goes wrong, noticing the tone you use with yourself, the phrases you repeat without thinking. Every time you say, "I always mess up," you're planting a karmic seed. Every time you say, "I'm so stupid," you're reinforcing a mental pathway that makes it harder to feel peace. Mindfulness teaches you that you don't have to believe these words. You don't even have to speak them. You can pause, you can feel the emotion rise, and choose silence. You can replace judgment with curiosity. This is not about pretending everything's fine. It's about being honest without being cruel. There is a difference between truth and violence. Telling yourself, "I need to work on this," is truth. Telling yourself, "I'm a failure," is violence. The second creates wounds. The first creates space to grow. When you begin to speak to yourself with care, your inner world softens. The body relaxes. The breath deepens. Because the war inside begins to end. Mindful speech also means refining the way you talk about others. Gossip, sarcasm, exaggeration. These might feel small, but they shape your energy. When you speak from anger, even if it's justified, you keep that anger alive inside you. When you mock or belittle, even as a joke, you dim your own light. Speech is never just about the listener. It's a mirror. It shows you what's living in your heart. Right speech is defined in Buddhist texts as avoiding lies, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. But these aren't rigid rules. They're guidelines for liberation. Because each kind of harmful speech creates specific forms of suffering. Lies create confusion, not just for others, but for yourself. The more you lie, even small lies, the more fragmented your inner life becomes. You start to forget who you really are beneath the mask. Divisive speech breaks connection. When you speak in a way that pits people against each other, you weaken the fabric of trust. Even if you feel right in the moment, what you're building is separation, and that always leads back to loneliness. Harsh speech is the most obvious kind. The kind that cuts. The kind that leaves invisible bruises. Even if you think someone deserves it, Harsh speech is a reflection of your own unrest. It pours gasoline on the fire. It never brings peace. Idle chatter seems harmless, but it drains your energy. It keeps the mind restless, fills the space where silence might have taught you something deeper. Every time we speak without awareness, we scatter our attention. We move further from the present. By practicing mindful speech, you begin to reverse these patterns. You speak more slowly. You choose words that build instead of break. You say less, but what you say has more weight, more care. And the inner speech, the one that runs constantly in the background, starts to follow the same path. Slowly, gently, but certainly. You start to hear yourself say, "It's okay," when you make a mistake. "I'm learning," instead of "I'm failing." You catch the old patterns and soften them. You replace attack with understanding. And in doing this, your mind becomes a kinder place to live. This change doesn't happen overnight. Years of self-criticism can't be erased with one moment of mindfulness. But every time you pause before speaking, you shift direction. Every time you choose a different word, you lay a new foundation. One of the most helpful ways to cultivate this awareness is through the practice of noble silence. Spend time each day not speaking, not to others, and not to yourself. Let the mind settle. Let the habitual inner voice grow quiet. In that stillness, something else appears. Presence, clarity, a deeper knowing that doesn't rely on words. When you return to speech after silence, you do so with more care. You feel the weight of each word. You stop wasting them. Another powerful technique is journaling. Writing down your thoughts, especially the ones you don't say out loud, helps you see the patterns more clearly. You might discover phrases you use repeatedly, especially when you're upset. When you see them on paper, you can question them. You can rewrite the story. Compassionate speech also includes knowing when not to speak. Not every situation needs your opinion. Not every silence needs to be filled. Speaking from ego, trying to prove, impress, control, keeps you trapped in identity. Speaking from awareness is different. It's slower, it's cleaner, it has less noise. This also changes your relationships. When you speak with kindness, people feel safer around you. When you listen deeply, people feel seen. And when you no longer speak harm to yourself, you stop expecting others to hurt you. You teach the world how to treat you by how you treat yourself. This is not about being perfect. It's about being honest without being hurtful, about being clear without being cold. It's about using your voice to heal, not to harm. That includes the voice inside your own head. The karmic effect of speech is subtle but profound. Every word either strengthens your suffering or dissolves it. There is no neutral. When you gossip, you feel more disconnected. When you lie, you feel more anxious. When you speak with anger, you carry that anger with you. But when you speak truthfully, kindly, clearly, you plant seeds of peace that bloom far beyond that moment. You might not see the effect right away, but over time, your whole life begins to shift. Your mind grows quieter, your body feels safer, your relationships become more real. Because when your words reflect clarity, your world reflects harmony. Speech is not just expression, it's creation. And now that you know this, you can no longer speak carelessly. You are creating your reality with every sentence. Speak as if the world is listening, because it is. Let your speech cleanse you. Let it lift you. Let it become a bridge between your heart and the world. No more violence, no more shame. Just truth. Spoken gently, lived fully. And when the old voices return, and they will, you'll know how to meet them, not with fear, not with silence, but with new words. Words shaped by wisdom, by practice, by presence. Keep speaking like that, and watch everything change. You've started to hear yourself differently. The voice that once attacked now hesitates. The inner critic grows quieter. You've seen how words shape your world, how silence can heal what noise could never reach. But beneath the surface of speech, beneath even your thoughts, there is something more foundational waiting to be understood. It's what sits at the core of your heaviest emotions, what quietly fuels your restlessness even when things appear calm. It's suffering, not just the pain of what happens, but the pain of how we hold it. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid suffering. They run from it, deny it, distract themselves. But in Buddhism, suffering is not something to flee. It's not a flaw, it's a gateway. The first noble truth doesn't ask you to like suffering, it asks you to recognize it, because until you do, it controls your life from the shadows. The word dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it means more than that. It refers to the unease that runs through life itself, the feeling that something is off, incomplete, unsatisfying. Even in good moments, there's a subtle tension, a sense that it won't last, that something is missing. This discomfort isn't proof that life is broken. It's a sign that clinging is happening, wanting things to stay the same, wanting pain to disappear, wanting control in a world that moves on its own terms. But here's the turning point. Suffering can be transformed. It can be used, not to harden you, but to open you, not to define you, but to wake you up. This is the alchemy of suffering, the process by which pain becomes wisdom, where your deepest wounds stop being sources of shame and start becoming paths to awakening. This transformation begins the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me?" That shift in question turns the whole experience inside out. Pain doesn't shrink from this question, it reveals itself. It starts to show you the root, the habit, the grasping that led to the wound. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming the power to see clearly. Wisdom doesn't come from avoiding difficulty. It comes from meeting it with attention, with honesty. Every time you sit with pain without numbing it, you learn something about your patterns, your attachments, your expectations. This is not theory. It's real-time self-awareness, the kind that changes your wiring. Trauma, too, becomes part of this path. Not by pretending it didn't happen, not by minimizing its weight, but by choosing to relate to it differently. When trauma is met with compassion and insight, it becomes less like a trap and more like a map. It shows you where the work is, where the healing wants to happen, and if you stay with it, not by reliving it, but by witnessing it with new eyes, it begins to shift, slowly, gently, deeply. Suffering breaks the illusion of control. It shows you what's real. When everything falls apart, masks drop. What's left is what can't be taken away. Your capacity to feel, to learn, to love, even when it hurts. That's where Bodhi begins, not in comfort, but in clarity. Bodhi, meaning awakening, doesn't rise in spite of pain. It rises because of it. This is why the Buddha didn't teach the removal of suffering as the first step. He taught the understanding of it. Because when you truly see your pain, not just the surface symptoms, but the core, you begin to see through it. You stop being consumed by it. You recognize that suffering isn't a punishment. It's a process. A process that reveals what matters, that strips away distraction, that brings you back to the breath, the moment, the raw, unfiltered experience of being alive. And from that contact with truth, wisdom arises. The kind of wisdom that's not intellectual, but cellular. It lives in your posture, in your gaze, in the stillness of your presence. Turning suffering into wisdom requires two things: awareness and compassion. Awareness to see clearly, compassion to stay present. Without awareness, pain becomes identity. Without compassion, awareness becomes cold. Together, they create the space where healing happens. This is also where the ego begins to dissolve, because the ego thrives on control, on certainty, on superiority. Suffering humbles all of that. It breaks the idea that you are separate, that you are untouchable, and that breaking is not the end, it's the opening. The broken places are where light enters, where you stop pretending, where you stop reaching for perfection and start becoming real. And when you become real, others feel safe to do the same. Your healing helps theirs, not by fixing them, but by showing them that it's possible. This transformation doesn't erase pain, it reframes it. You start to see that the most painful parts of your life were not empty. They were full of insight, buried beneath the resistance, beneath the fear. Every disappointment showed you an attachment. Every heartbreak revealed a truth. Every loss taught impermanence in a way no book ever could. Some lessons can only be learned through suffering, not because suffering is noble, but because it removes the distractions that keep you asleep. It wakes you up to the fragility of life, to the urgency of presence. And once you see that clearly, your priorities change. What once seemed important now feels empty. What you used to ignore now feels sacred. You stop wasting time. You speak more directly. You feel more deeply. You hold grief and gratitude in the same breath. Because you've seen how fast things fall apart, how quickly life can shift. This isn't fear, it's awareness. And with awareness comes tenderness. For yourself, for others, for every being moving through their own invisible storm. This is where compassion becomes instinctive. When you've suffered, you recognize it in others, not with pity, but with understanding. You don't need to explain it. You just show up differently. You become a safe space, not because you've solved everything, but because you've learned how to stay present with what hurts. This is the gift of suffering transformed. Not comfort, not closure, but openness. A heart that no longer needs to protect itself with armor. A mind that no longer runs from what's uncomfortable. A spirit that meets life as it is, not as it was supposed to be. You stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself as whole, precisely because of what you've lived through. The cracks didn't destroy you. They shaped you. They made you honest, humble, awake. In this way, your suffering becomes sacred, not in a romantic way, but in a grounded, embodied way. It becomes part of your story, but no longer the whole story. It becomes part of your wisdom, but no longer your identity, and that wisdom radiates. It touches others without trying, because when you've turned pain into understanding, your very presence teaches. You become someone who doesn't flinch at emotion, who can sit with grief without needing to fix it, who can hold space for uncertainty without needing a quick answer. This kind of transformation isn't dramatic. It's subtle, slow. It happens in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a deep breath, in the stillness after tears. There's no announcement, just a shift, a softening, a steady light that wasn't there before. To live this way is not to seek suffering. It's to stop fearing it. It's to know that when it comes, and it will, you have tools, you have perspective, you have the ability to stay, to learn, to grow. This is not spiritual bypassing, it's the deepest form of integration. You carry your story, but it doesn't carry you. You honor your wounds, but they don't define you. You let pain move through you, and in doing so, you move closer to truth, closer to Bodhi, closer to peace that cannot be taken. And it all begins when you stop asking, how can I get rid of this? And start asking, how can this awaken me? The path of transformation is not easy, but it is real, and the wisdom it brings is not fragile. It's unshakable. You are already walking this path, word by word, breath by breath. Let it carry you deeper. Let it show you who you truly are, beneath the pain, beneath the story, beyond the suffering. Because what you find there is not more pain, it's freedom. When suffering stops being the enemy and becomes the teacher, you begin to see life through different eyes. You no longer ask how to escape your experience. You begin asking what it's made of. You no longer assume pain is personal. You start wondering what exactly you've been calling me. That question leads to the root, to the structure beneath every thought, emotion, and reaction, the structure known in Buddhism as the 5 skandhas. They're not just philosophical ideas, they are the building blocks of your moment-to-moment reality. If you've ever felt stuck in anger, drowning in sadness, or trapped in self-doubt, these 5 aggregates are where those experiences take shape. They create the illusion of a solid, separate self, the self that suffers, the self that clings, the self that fears. And the good news is, what is constructed can be deconstructed. The first aggregate is form. This is your body, your senses, the physical world around you. It's what you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. But it's not only external, it includes your own flesh and bones, your skin and nerves, your breath and posture. Most people take form to be self. My face, my voice, my pain. But the body is changing every moment. Cells die and renew. Skin wrinkles and stretches. Energy rises and fades. If the body is always shifting, can it really be who you are? The mind tends to attach to form tightly, especially in pain. a sore back, a racing heart, a heavy chest. These sensations can feel like identity, but when you examine them closely, they dissolve into sensation, not self, just vibration, just signals. You begin to see that the body is not the enemy, and it's not the core of you. It's a condition, a vehicle, not a prison. Next is feeling. In Buddhist terms, this doesn't mean emotion. It refers to the raw experience of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Every moment of contact between a sense organ and an object gives rise to a feeling tone. This happens before thought. You touch something warm, pleasant. You hear a harsh sound, unpleasant. You sit still and feel nothing strong, neutral. The feeling tone is subtle, but it drives so much of your behavior. Pleasant, you want more. Unpleasant, you push away. Neutral, you ignore. That cycle runs beneath your awareness all day long, but once you see it, you can pause. Instead of automatically reacting, you feel the tone without clinging. You don't chase pleasure or resist discomfort. You meet each feeling with clarity, not compulsion. Then comes perception. This is the process of recognizing and labeling. You see a shape and name it. You hear a tone and classify it. Perception organizes the world, but it also limits it. Because once something is labeled, your mind stops seeing it clearly. It becomes fixed in meaning. That face is my enemy. That voice is my critic. That look is rejection. Perception turns fleeting events into solid identities, and those identities become burdens. If you misperceive someone's silence as judgment, your whole emotional state shifts. But if you recognize perception as just another process, you can loosen its hold. You can ask, is this what's really happening, or is this just a mental habit? This doesn't erase perception, it makes it flexible. It stops it from becoming a cage. The fourth aggregate is volition, also called mental formations. This includes intentions, habits, desires, judgments, and reactions. It's the momentum of your karma playing out in the mind. Volition includes all the subtle pushes and pulls that move you, like the urge to speak, the drive to please, the fear of failure. Most of what we call personality lives here, and much of it is automatic. You feel triggered and you snap. You feel hurt and you retreat. But when you observe volition directly, you start to see its mechanics. You begin to notice how every reaction is shaped by past conditions, and that realization creates a space. In that space, freedom begins. Volition is not destiny. It can be reshaped, but only if you see it clearly. Only if you stop identifying with every impulse. You are not your reactivity. You are the awareness that sees it. When that becomes real, even long-standing patterns begin to shift. The final aggregate is consciousness. This isn't awareness in the ultimate sense. It's the momentary knowing of an object through a specific sense. Eye consciousness when seeing, ear consciousness when hearing, mind consciousness when thinking. It's the stream of knowing that flows without pause, but this consciousness depends on conditions. Without an object, there's no knowing. Without a sense base, there's no contact. Consciousness, too, is empty of self. It arises and passes away countless times each second. And yet, we cling to it. We take it as proof of an inner observer, a thinker, a doer. But that solid I is nowhere to be found. There is just knowing, without owner, without core. When you put these 5 aggregates together, form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, they create the illusion of a self, a me with a past and a future, a me that gets hurt and needs protecting. But when you take them apart and look deeply, that solid self starts to dissolve. There is still experience, there is still memory and identity and pain, but there is no longer a fixed center around which it all revolves. This insight doesn't make you disappear. It makes you free, because if there's no fixed self, then there's nothing to defend, no ego to protect, no story that has to stay intact. You can be more fluid, more present, more responsive, not because you've added anything, but because you've stopped clinging to what was never truly there. The 5 skandhas are not just philosophy. They are practice. You can explore them every time you meditate, every time you feel triggered, every time you feel overwhelmed. When sadness arises, ask, what's the form? Where is it in the body? What's the feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? What perception is shaping this? What mental formation is pushing it? What consciousness is aware of it? Each layer reveals more. Each question takes you closer to the root, and the root is always clinging to sensation, clinging to identity, clinging to permanence in a world that never stays still. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning experience. It means meeting it fully, then releasing it. When you begin to live with this understanding, everything shifts. You still feel, but you don't hold. You still experience pain, but you don't become it. You still walk through the world, but without the constant weight of self-concern. This is not numbness. It's intimacy without attachment. It's clarity without tension. Even conflict changes. Someone criticizes you, and you notice the reaction rising. You feel the body tighten, the unpleasant tone, the old perceptions, the mental formations. You see the whole process, and in that seeing, the ego softens. The need to defend or attack dissolves. You respond from presence, not pattern. This is how suffering ends, not by escaping it, but by seeing through it. The 5 skandhas don't remove pain. They show you that pain is not personal, that it arises from conditions, that it passes when the conditions change. This insight isn't cold, it's liberating. It allows you to love without fear, to feel without drowning, to live without needing everything to go your way. The ego wants to be special, right, protected, and every time life contradicts that, it suffers. But when the ego is seen as a bundle of changing aggregates, it no longer has to be taken so seriously. You stop feeding it with every thought. You stop defending it with every word. And slowly, the space it once occupied is filled with peace. This is not detachment from life. It's full engagement without the burden of me. It's feeling every emotion, touching every moment, but not adding the extra layer of clinging. It's doing what needs to be done with clarity, not for ego gain. That clarity is rare, but it is possible, and it begins with awareness of what you are made of, not as a soul, not as a fixed self, but as a flow. In that flow, everything becomes lighter. The past loses its grip. The future becomes less frightening. The present opens like a door. You begin to trust your experience, not because it's always pleasant, but because you know how to meet it, without running, without resisting, without turning it into a story. The 5 skandhas don't eliminate the human condition, but they dissolve the illusion that suffering is personal, permanent, or necessary. They show you that the self you've been defending is a collection of processes. And those processes, when seen clearly, lose their power to bind you. Keep looking, keep asking. What is this made of? What is really happening? Every answer brings you closer to freedom. Every layer you peel back reveals more truth. Not in theory, in felt experience. And in that truth, the need to fight life disappears. Because you finally see there is nothing to protect, nothing to prove, just this unfolding moment, empty of self, full of peace. When you stop clinging to the idea of a solid self, something shifts. The mind softens. The patterns that once felt so permanent begin to lose their weight. You no longer need to defend what isn't truly there. You start to watch your experience with more clarity, more honesty. But there's a part of your mind that still works beneath the surface, shaping your reactions before you're even aware of them. This part doesn't respond to reasoning. It doesn't speak in full sentences. It shows itself through symbols, sensations, shadows, and it speaks most clearly in dreams. The subconscious mind is not silent. It's always working, carrying memories, storing reactions, and replaying stories that the conscious mind has forgotten. This is where some of your deepest habits live. This is why certain fears seem to come out of nowhere, why some emotions feel so automatic. Because long before you can think about them, they've already taken shape in your sleep. You spend 1/3 of your life in this hidden world, and yet most people never explore it. But in Buddhist dream yoga, this forgotten realm becomes a sacred space for awakening. Dream yoga is not about controlling your dreams. It's about using the dream state to understand your mind more deeply, to see how it creates fear, to see how it clings to identity, to see how it weaves illusion. In the waking world, you can observe thoughts and emotions as they arise, but in dreams, those same thoughts become your entire world. You become the fear. You become the desire. You run from danger or chase illusions without knowing it's all a projection. Learning to wake up inside the dream shows you just how much your mind shapes your experience. In Buddhist tradition, dreams are not meaningless. They are reflections of your mental and karmic patterns. When something is unresolved, when guilt, anger, grief, or fear have not been fully processed, they often show up at night. But most people forget their dreams or dismiss them. Dream yoga reverses that habit. It turns the dream state into a place of learning, healing, and release. Lucid dreaming is the foundation. This is the skill of recognizing that you are dreaming while the dream is still happening. It begins with awareness. Small habits during the day help build this awareness. Asking yourself regularly, am I dreaming? Observing your surroundings with attention, noticing details. These habits carry over into sleep. One night, you ask the same question, and something clicks. You realize the laws of the world around you are different, and you become aware, not just in the body, but in the dream mind. But awareness alone is not the goal. In Buddhist dream yoga, lucidity is only the beginning. The deeper work happens when you bring the same mindfulness, the same non-clinging, into the dream itself. Instead of trying to control the dream, you observe it, you explore it, you allow whatever arises to teach you something. If fear shows up, you don't run, you meet it. If a past event replays, you stay present. You recognize that this, too, is a projection of the mind, just like every emotion in waking life. This practice reveals how your reactions are conditioned. You may wake up from a dream in tears, even though nothing truly happened. The body responds, the heart races, the pain feels real. But it was all thought, all appearance. In seeing this clearly, you begin to understand how your waking mind does the same thing. It creates stories, believes them, reacts to them, and suffers. Dream yoga is not separate from meditation. It is meditation continued in sleep. To prepare for dream yoga, you begin by strengthening your daily awareness, practicing mindfulness in the simplest moments, watching how your mind drifts, how it grabs at thoughts, how it creates meaning. You observe these habits during the day so you can recognize them at night. You keep a dream journal, not to analyze, but to remember, to develop respect for this other realm of experience. The more you remember your dreams, the more you begin to see the patterns, the repeated themes, the unresolved stories. This is not about turning dreams into something dramatic. It's about deepening your sensitivity, seeing how fear shows up in different forms, how desire disguises itself, how shame speaks through metaphor. You don't need to fix anything in the dream. You only need to witness. That witnessing in itself is transformation. As you build this practice, you may notice that certain dreams feel more vivid, more charged. These are opportunities. If you become lucid in one of these dreams, you can practice staying with the emotion, not changing the dream, but being fully present in it. If fear arises, you don't fight it. You breathe. You remember that this is a teaching moment, not just symbolic, but directly connected to how you relate to fear in waking life. Dream yoga also works with visualization before sleep, recalling the day, releasing regret, forgiving yourself, setting the intention to stay aware. This gentle preparation helps soften the mind and open it to more clarity during sleep. Over time, you begin to fall asleep with mindfulness, not clinging to thought, but resting in awareness. This is the threshold between waking and dreaming. And when awareness carries through, you begin to wake up inside the mind's deepest spaces. This awareness doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. Because when you've trained yourself to recognize illusion in dreams, you start to see illusion in daily life. You start to recognize how much you assume, how much you fabricate, how much suffering is created by believing everything the mind presents. And in that recognition, there's release. One of the most powerful aspects of dream yoga is how it reveals your hidden conditioning. Wounds that you thought were healed may resurface. But now you have tools. You know how to stay. You know how to observe. You no longer fear these old feelings because you faced them in the raw, honest space of the dream. And that facing gives you confidence. Even death, in Buddhist view, is connected to dreaming. The bardo, the transitional state after death, is said to be dreamlike. The mind continues, projecting reality from habit and karma. Learning to stay awake in dreams is seen as preparation. So you can stay awake in the bardo. So you can choose with wisdom. So you are not pulled by fear or clinging. The way you meet your dreams becomes training for how you meet death and how you meet every moment of change. But dream yoga is not only preparation, it is liberation here and now, because the insights you gain don't stay in the dream. They carry into the way you speak, the way you feel, the way you relate. You begin to let go more easily, to respond with less fear. You start to wake up, not just at night, but in the middle of your life. This is not about escaping the world, it's about understanding it, seeing how the mind shapes experience, seeing how perception filters everything. When you truly know that, down to your bones, nothing can hold you the same way. Not anger, not grief, not judgment. Because you've watched those things arise and dissolve. You've seen them for what they are. You can't fake this insight. It has to be lived. And that's why dream yoga is so important, because it gives you another field of practice, a whole other world in which to train. You don't have to wait for ideal conditions. Every night you have another chance to see clearly, to wake up. The most powerful teachers often say, "What matters is not what appears in the dream, but how you relate to it." The monster is not the problem, it's the reaction. The beauty is not the problem, it's the clinging. The story is not the prison, it's the belief. Every dream is a mirror, every dream is a lesson. When you become still enough to see this, you stop trying to control, you stop trying to escape, you open to everything with the same heart, the heart of awareness. And that heart does not judge, it does not run, it simply knows. Let the dream world become part of your practice. Let it teach you, let it show you where your fear still lives, where your heart still closes. Not so you can feel ashamed, but so you can open. Every night becomes an invitation, every dream becomes a doorway. You are not limited to waking consciousness. You are not limited to logic. You are a field of awareness, and that awareness extends beyond what you've been taught to call real. Train in it. Trust it. Let it carry you deeper into the truth, because the truth is not bound by the sun or the clock. The truth follows you, even in sleep. And now you're learning to follow it back. When you begin to wake up inside your dreams, when you start to see how much of life is shaped by unconscious habit, something unexpected often rises to the surface. It's not just your own patterns, not just your own voice. It's something older. A heaviness that didn't start with you. A reaction that doesn't match your personal story. A sadness or fear that seems to belong to someone else. These hidden traces don't always come from your life. They're carried in your blood, your memory, your name. In Buddhism, this is not superstition, it's lineage karma. You inherit more than genes. You inherit habits of thought, emotional responses, patterns of fear, coping mechanisms and internalized beliefs passed through generations. These are the unseen threads that influence your reactions before you even know why. Sometimes the tightness in your chest, the hesitation in your choices, the shame you can't trace to any clear memory, it all points to something older. These aren't just your burdens, they are echoes of what came before you. Buddhist teachings don't see this as a curse. It's an opportunity. The pain that reaches you through your lineage is not asking to be ignored. It's asking to be healed, and not just for you, but for all those who came before and all those who will come after. Rituals in Tibetan and Zen traditions offer a profound response to this inherited weight. They don't try to erase the past. They honor it. They give form to what's been forgotten. They create space where grief, gratitude, and release can coexist. These rituals don't live in theory. They live in breath, chant, incense, water, fire, earth. They bring the intangible into something you can touch, see, and feel. In Tibetan Buddhism, one of the most powerful practices for releasing karmic burdens is the Sur offering. This ritual involves burning fragrant substances, typically combined with mantra recitation, and offering the subtle scent to beings in all realms, including ancestors, wandering spirits, and those who remain stuck in karmic confusion. The offering is not just physical, it is emotional, mental, energetic. You give from the heart. You acknowledge what was unresolved, unspoken, or unloved. You say to the past, I see you, I honor your pain, and I choose not to carry it further. The Sur offering becomes a bridge between worlds, a moment where the present touches the past with awareness, where karma, instead of being passed on blindly, is met with compassion and consciously transformed. You are not asking ancestors to change. You are offering them peace through your own awakening. In Zen traditions, the practice of ancestral veneration is often quiet and subtle. It's woven into daily rituals, seasonal ceremonies, and memorial chants. Chanting names, lighting incense, bowing before photographs. These small acts carry deep meaning. They remind you that you are not alone in your journey. You are part of a continuum. And in remembering those who came before, you begin to understand your own emotional inheritance with more clarity. Zen emphasizes the importance of remembering without attachment. You do not cling to the past. You bow to it. You express gratitude even for those who caused harm, not to excuse them, but to free yourself from hatred. In doing so, you begin to understand that every unresolved wound left by those before you now lives as a choice in your own behavior. What you do with that choice determines whether it becomes another repetition or a turning point. Buddhist funeral and memorial practices also help the living release the emotional weight of unresolved grief. These rituals are not just for the deceased, they are for those who remain. To bow, to chant, to make offerings is not only to send merit, it is to clear the channels within you, channels where resentment may still flow, where silence may still hurt. These rituals do not fix the past, they liberate the present. You don't need to be part of a monastery or temple to engage in these practices. A simple altar in your home, even just a candle lit with sincere intention, can become a sacred place of release. Speak the names of those who shaped you. Speak even if your relationship was painful. Speak even if you never knew them. There is no hierarchy in the emotional body, only what is acknowledged and what is ignored. Healing begins the moment you stop pretending you are separate from what you inherited. In Tibetan Vajrayana, specific practices such as Vajrasattva purification can be extended to ancestral karma. The 100-syllable mantra, recited with focus and a wish to cleanse the entire lineage, becomes a deeply healing act. You are not asking for personal gain. You are asking to be a vessel of release for every grandmother who swallowed her sorrow, for every father who never knew how to express love, for every child silenced by fear. You become the one who says, "The cycle ends here." This is not about blame. It's about understanding. Many emotional patterns were born from survival. People did what they could with what they had. But now you have more awareness. You have the tools. And so the responsibility and the gift falls to you. You get to hold what was dropped. You get to bless what was abandoned. You get to set down what was carried too long. Chanting, bowing, lighting incense, these are not empty rituals. They are acts of embodiment, of grounding intention in form. They shift energy in ways logic can't. They bypass the resistance of thought and go straight to the body, straight to the heart. The release is not always immediate, but it is real. Each time you show up, each time you practice, something loosens, something softens, something returns to stillness. Even the act of cooking a meal and offering the first portion to your ancestors is a form of healing. It says, "I remember, I share, I release." These rituals help you move grief that has no words. They make space for emotions that were never safe to feel. And when those emotions move, you don't just heal yourself, you shift the energy of the entire field around you. There's a Buddhist understanding that when you purify your mind, it radiates outward. It blesses not only your life, but the lives of countless beings. This includes your family, both living and gone. When you dedicate merit from your practice to your lineage, you're saying, "May all who came before me find peace. May all who come after me suffer less." That wish itself begins to change things. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes the release shows up as a softer tone in your voice, as a new level of patience, as a tear you didn't expect when you heard an old story. Sometimes it comes as a dream, where someone long gone finally smiles. These are not fantasies, they are signs of movement in the field, signs that something deep is unwinding. Forgiveness in this context is not forced. It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means releasing the grip that the past has on your nervous system. It means saying, "I no longer carry your pain as mine. I carry your strength. I carry your lessons, but I walk forward on my own path." This is the true meaning of lineage healing. It's not erasing what happened. It's integrating what was left unfinished. It's giving your ancestors the gift of your presence, of your mindfulness, of your refusal to repeat the same harm, even when the patterns are strong. And these rituals, however simple or complex, become containers for that transformation. They give you something to do with your hands, your voice, your breath, so that the healing doesn't just stay in your mind, it becomes part of your life. This path is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming free. Free to love your family without being bound by their pain. Free to honor your roots without being defined by their shadows. Free to live without dragging the unspoken grief of generations behind you. Every step you take in awareness, every breath you offer in compassion, every word you dedicate to those who could not speak, this is the work. This is the ritual. This is how you heal what you did not create, but have the power to release. Let the past speak. Let it rise. Let it move through you, and then let it go. Because healing forward always begins by healing backward. And the peace you bring to your lineage is the peace that will echo into the lives of those not yet born. When you begin to release the burdens inherited from those who came before, your path begins to feel lighter. Not because life becomes easier, but because your relationship to the past changes. You stop carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. And now, something else becomes clear. Letting go is not just about history. It's about this moment, this breath, this continuous unfolding of beginnings and endings. Life doesn't pause between transitions. It moves, and you are constantly asked to let go, to release not just the past, but each version of yourself as it passes. In Buddhist teachings, this is the wisdom of the bardo. The word bardo means in between. It is often spoken of in relation to death, the state between one life and the next. But the deeper understanding is much broader. Every moment of change is a bardo. Every ending, every loss, every shift in identity. You go through dozens of bardos in a single day, from waking to sleeping, from joy to sadness, from one breath to the next. Each is an invitation to let go of what was and rest in what is now. Bardo teachings help you see that attachment is not just to things, it's to moments, ideas, feelings, roles. You identify with being a partner, a parent, a success, a failure. You hold tightly to how life should look. And when those images begin to change, suffering arises, not because of the change, but because of resistance. In the bardo, resistance has no place to hide. That's why it can feel so raw. You are no longer who you were, and not yet who you will be. The ground disappears, certainty vanishes. But this is not a punishment. It is a doorway. A rare moment when you can see yourself clearly without the layers. And if you can stay present in the bardo instead of rushing through it, you can learn the art of release, not as a loss, but as a return. Psychologically, bardos are the moments when your identity softens, when your usual ways of thinking no longer apply, when something breaks through crisis, through realization, through deep change, and what used to define you no longer fits. You are not just confused, you are being reformed. But if you panic, you miss the teaching. If you grasp, you create new suffering. The only path through is presence. To train in this, Buddhist practice encourages you to become intimate with impermanence. Not as a concept, but as a living truth. You watch how each thought rises and passes. You watch how emotions peak and dissolve. You observe how attachment causes pain, not because you love, but because you expect permanence in a world built on change. In bardos, that truth becomes unignorable, and that is a gift. The teachings say that in the bardo after death, the mind is highly reactive. Thoughts manifest immediately. Fear can distort what you see. Clinging creates hallucinations. But the same is true in life. When one phase ends, whether a job, a relationship, or a sense of purpose, the mind races. It creates stories. It grabs onto anything that feels solid. This reaction is understandable, but it is not helpful. What is helpful is learning to relax into uncertainty. Relaxation here doesn't mean indifference. It means loosening the grip. It means allowing space between thought and reaction. When a life transition arises, expected or not, you bring the same awareness you would bring to a meditation cushion. You breathe, you feel, you name what's happening without clinging to it. You allow grief without being consumed. You allow hope without being controlled. The bardo is not a place of comfort, but it is a place of truth. And truth is the beginning of liberation. In this space, you see what you've been holding too tightly, the identity you've built, the dreams you've attached to, the fears you've avoided. All of them surface, and now you can meet them not with avoidance, but with compassion. This is where the power of bardo practice lies. It's not about waiting until death to understand these teachings. It's about recognizing that you are in transition constantly, that everything is shifting, that you are always standing in the doorway of what was and what is becoming. And instead of trying to rush through that door, you can pause, you can learn, you can surrender. There are specific practices that help prepare for these moments. One is Fowa, the practice of conscious transference. It's traditionally used to guide consciousness at the time of death, but its essence can be used at any ending. It teaches you to let go with clarity, to shift your awareness upward, into openness, into spaciousness, instead of contracting into fear. You can use this when you feel grief, when you feel stuck, when a part of your life is falling away. It trains the mind to die well in every moment. Another practice is meditating on the dissolution of the elements. In Tibetan texts, this refers to how earth, water, fire, air, and space dissolve at the time of death. But psychologically, it reflects the unraveling of identity. When you lose your grounding, when your emotions flood, when your energy burns out, when your breath becomes shallow, when your awareness expands. Recognizing these stages helps you navigate intense transitions with more wisdom. In daily life, transitions come in many forms. The end of a habit, the loss of someone you loved, the aging of the body, the letting go of a dream. Each one offers the same opportunity to meet change with presence instead of fear. To see that letting go is not the same as being lost. It's a returning to clarity, to stillness, to the part of you that doesn't break when things fall apart. Bardo teachings show you that fear is most powerful when you refuse to look at it. But when you turn toward it, it softens. Because fear thrives on uncertainty, but presence dissolves uncertainty. You don't need to know what's next. You just need to stay here with what is, with what's leaving, with what's beginning, without needing to control it. Every bardo is a rehearsal for freedom, a chance to let go of what you thought you needed, a chance to release the false safety of fixed identity, a chance to rest in the groundless space where transformation happens. And every time you allow yourself to be present in that space, you become more fluid, more awake, more free. This freedom doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you feel everything without drowning. It means you grieve and love and release with full attention. It means you stop clinging to the illusion that anything lasts. And because of that, you cherish it more. The people in your life, the moments of beauty, the breath. Nothing is taken for granted because nothing is promised. You also begin to see how many bardos you've already survived. You've been through so many endings, so many silent transitions. You've felt the world fall apart and reassemble. And here you are, still breathing, still learning. That recognition gives you confidence. You are not a fixed self trying to control reality. You are awareness moving through reality, with less fear, with more grace. Let this teaching settle in the center of your being. Every transition is sacred, not because it's easy, but because it strips away illusion. Every bardo reveals the truth that life is process, not possession. Flow, not form. Awakening is not a destination. It is your willingness to remain awake in the middle of change. This path is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming no one, free of rigid roles, free of stories that bind you. And in that emptiness, love becomes purer, compassion becomes stronger, action becomes more skillful. You live without armor, but not without strength. Bardo practice is preparation for death, yes, but it's more than that. It's training for life in its rawest form. Life without guarantees, life without escape routes, life with eyes open, heart open, breath steady. You learn to stay, to breathe, to bow when something ends, to welcome what comes next, even when you don't know what it will be. And when death finally arrives, not as a theory, but as reality, you will not panic. You will not run. You will recognize this too as a transition, a bardo, another space to enter with awareness, another illusion to meet with clarity, another chance to let go, not as loss, but as liberation. You are already practicing this. Every time you soften instead of tighten, every time you allow silence instead of rushing to fix, every time you feel the urge to hold on and choose instead to breathe. This is how the mind becomes free, not by finding stability, but by learning how to rest in change. And this is the path you are walking now. Let it carry you. Let it teach you. Let it show you that what you thought was an ending is just another opening. Letting go through the lens of bardo teaches you how to be fully present in change. It teaches you that every shift, no matter how small or shattering, is a path into awareness. But even with all the clarity gained in transitions, the mind can still remain loud. After all the insight, the mind keeps speaking. It replays old thoughts. It returns to worries. It fills space with stories, even when you already understand the lesson. That noise becomes the next challenge. It keeps you on the surface. It drains your energy. It makes you feel distant from yourself. And there is one ancient antidote for this restlessness: silence. Not the silence of a quiet room, not the absence of sound. Noble silence. The kind of silence that goes deeper than words. The kind that holds everything but clings to nothing. The kind that monks practice in forests, that meditators honor in retreats. A silence that reveals more than speech ever could. Because when all outer noise ends, the inner noise has nowhere to hide. Mental turbulence is not only caused by what happens, it's intensified by what the mind says about what happens. A single moment of difficulty is often multiplied by endless commentary. Thought feeds thought. Reaction feeds reaction. Silence breaks that cycle. Not by force, but by space. It creates a container where thoughts lose urgency, where the need to explain disappears, where peace is not added, it is uncovered. Noble silence is not suppression. It is mindfulness without distraction. It is presence without narration. It is awareness that no longer needs to perform. When you stop speaking, your energy stops leaking. Your attention gathers inward, and what felt overwhelming becomes clear, manageable, even still. Forest monks have long known this. They don't isolate themselves to escape the world. They do it to hear it more deeply, to see the mind without distortion. In silence, they study not just teachings, but their own reactions. They sit with craving, with fear, with memory. They watch these rise and fall until there is nothing left to chase. In that stillness, the mind begins to settle, not because it is forced, but because silence is its natural home. In Vipassana meditation, noble silence is part of the container. For days, sometimes weeks, there is no speaking, no eye contact, no gestures. The outer world becomes still. The inner world becomes loud at first, but then something shifts. The mind sees how repetitive it is, how much of it is just habit. Without new input, the old patterns lose momentum. Thoughts that once felt important start to lose their pull. And from that quiet, real insight begins to rise. Silence also neutralizes emotional reactivity. Most of the time, anger needs an audience. Fear needs a listener. Judgment needs someone to hear it. When you commit to noble silence, these impulses appear, but have nowhere to land. You see them arise, but you don't speak them into the world. You don't give them fuel, you just watch. This doesn't mean you repress your emotions. It means you meet them directly, without decoration, without defense. Speech, while powerful, often pulls you away from your internal center. Even kind words can become a distraction when they are used to avoid what is uncomfortable inside. Silence removes that option. You are left with only what is real, only what is present. And that presence is where transformation happens. Silence also sharpens perception. When the mind stops turning outward through speech, your senses become more vivid. You notice subtle tension in your body. You notice patterns in your thoughts. You notice how quickly you reach for distraction. And the more you notice, the more you understand. Insight is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, only heard when everything else is quiet. This is why noble silence is so valuable in detoxifying mental chatter. The more you stay in silence, the more you realize that not every thought deserves a response. Not every emotion needs to be explained. Not every question needs an answer. You begin to trust stillness, to live in it even when nothing is happening, especially when nothing is happening. In everyday life, silence is rare. Not just external, but internal. Most people move from one noise to another, from a conversation to a podcast, from music to scrolling. Silence feels awkward, unproductive. But in Buddhism, silence is not absence, it is space. And space is what allows wisdom to arise. You do not need to chase answers. You need to be quiet enough to hear them when they come. Even short periods of noble silence can change your nervous system. 10 minutes of true silence, no speaking, no reacting, no seeking, can begin to shift your baseline. You feel less hurried, less tense. Your breath deepens, your muscles soften, because you are no longer caught in the performance of the mind. And as the mind slows down, you start to hear what lives beneath it. Not more thought, but something different. A deeper kind of knowing, not logical, not verbal. A calm clarity that doesn't argue. This clarity is your natural state. It's not created by silence, it is revealed by it. This is the silence that masters speak from. It's why their words feel so precise, even when few are spoken, because their speech is not reaction, it is response. It comes from stillness, not from habit. You begin to learn this rhythm. You speak less, but what you say matters more. You interrupt less. You listen more fully. Your communication becomes medicine, not noise. Noble silence also reveals your cravings, the urge to speak, to explain, to entertain. These urges arise, and in silence you don't follow them. You watch, and you learn. You see how often speech is used to gain control, to seek approval, to fill space. But when you stop reaching outward, you begin to see that nothing is missing. Silence shows you that presence is enough. This is why silence is a purification. Not because it changes your environment, but because it purifies your view of yourself, of others, of reality. It strips away the unnecessary. It leaves only what's essential. And from that essence, real transformation begins. The practice of noble silence is not limited to retreats. You can bring it into daily life. A silent morning before the phone turns on, a walk without music, a meal without talking, a moment between tasks where you say nothing, do nothing, and simply feel. These small acts create space in the mind. They restore what has been scattered. And in that space, you begin to see patterns that once went unnoticed. You begin to understand your reactions, not by analyzing them, but by feeling their texture in the silence. You begin to notice when you speak from tension and when you speak from truth. This awareness creates choice, and that choice brings freedom. Silence also allows grief to surface. So much pain stays buried under noise. Words can keep it hidden, but when the mind becomes quiet, the body speaks, the tears come, the breath changes, the memory rises, and you don't run, you stay, you hold it in stillness, and the silence becomes a healing container. Joy, too, becomes clearer in silence, not the joy of excitement, but the joy of being, of sitting still and knowing you are enough, of feeling your breath move gently, of hearing the wind, the heartbeat, the silence itself. This is not dramatic joy, but it is steady, unshakable. It does not depend on conditions, it arises from within. And over time, the silence doesn't feel empty, it feels full, full of life, full of wisdom, full of presence. You no longer fear it, you crave it, because it brings you back to yourself. This is not about avoiding life. It's about learning how to return to the center of life, where words are no longer needed to prove anything, where silence becomes your teacher, your refuge, your power. Let noble silence be part of your practice. Let it cleanse the mind. Let it slow your reactions. Let it show you what has always been true, that peace is not something you create. It is something you uncover when the noise fades and the stillness remains. You are not the thoughts. You are the space between them, and silence is the doorway back. After sitting in silence, after watching your thoughts settle, something becomes undeniable. Beneath the quiet, there's a voice you still carry. It's not loud like the others. It's not chaotic like mental chatter. It's subtle, persistent, and often cruel. It sounds like you, but it doesn't speak from love. It criticizes, corrects, compares. It knows exactly where you're most vulnerable and echoes there. It isn't trying to help, it's trying to protect, but through punishment. This is the inner critic. And now, in the space created by noble silence, you can finally face it. Silence reveals the tone of your relationship with yourself. If you pay close attention, you begin to notice how you speak inwardly when you're disappointed, when you're tired, when things don't go the way you hoped. This voice doesn't only emerge in failure, it appears even in success, questioning your worth, pushing for more, never satisfied. It was shaped over years, maybe by a parent, a teacher, a culture that valued achievement over acceptance. It learned to speak harshly because that's what it thought would keep you safe. But now, this voice is no longer protecting you. It's wounding you from within. Buddhist teachings offer a direct way to transform this voice, not by arguing with it, not by silencing it, but by surrounding it with something it's never known, unconditional friendliness. This is the heart of metta, or loving kindness. It is the deliberate cultivation of goodwill, warmth, and gentle care, first for yourself, then for others. In the context of the inner critic, metta becomes a way to change the entire emotional environment in which that voice lives. Loving kindness meditation begins simply. You sit, you breathe, you bring to mind the intention to be kind. You repeat phrases, not to convince yourself, but to plant seeds. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be happy. May I live with ease. You say these not because you already believe them, but because saying them gently begins to rewrite the inner script. At first, resistance arises. The critic says you don't deserve this kindness. It says you haven't done enough. It mocks the softness. This is part of the process. You're not failing when this happens. You're reaching the very place where the healing needs to happen. The critic has been dominant for so long, it won't step aside easily. But it's not stronger than love. It's just louder. At first. As you continue the practice, you learn to direct these phrases to the parts of you that hurt the most, the part that always doubts, the part that's ashamed, the part that feels like a burden. Instead of judging these parts, you hold them. You say, may you be free from fear, may you be held in compassion. You say this to yourself, not because it changes things instantly, but because it invites a different relationship, one based not on fixing, but on understanding. Metta doesn't erase pain, it makes space for it. It says, you're allowed to feel this. You don't need to hide it. You don't need to justify it. You are worthy of love even here, especially here. As you deepen the practice, you start to recognize the critic not as an enemy, but as a wounded voice. A voice that learned harshness as a strategy. Maybe it believed that being hard on you would make you more acceptable. That punishment would lead to improvement. But now you can offer it something new. You can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I choose another way. I choose kindness." Over time, the critic softens. It becomes less dominant. It still speaks, but you no longer obey it. You hear its words, and you answer not with compliance, but with compassion. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you whole. You still grow. You still learn. But you do it with care, not with self-harm. Loving kindness also changes the nervous system. Harshness activates stress. It narrows the mind. It contracts the body. But metta soothes the nervous system. It widens perspective. It allows creativity. It invites rest. As you send these intentions of kindness inward, the body responds. The breath becomes smoother. The tension in the chest eases. The mind begins to settle, not through silence alone, but through safety. This practice also reveals how often your inner critic has shaped your decisions, how many times you've avoided opportunities out of fear of failure, how often you've minimized your needs because you believed they didn't matter. Loving kindness brings this into awareness. It says, your needs do matter, your dreams are valid, your heart is not too much, and this voice of care slowly becomes the voice that guides you. Eventually, you begin to recognize metta not just as a practice, but as a natural state. The critic is learned, love is remembered. It was always there, underneath the pain, underneath the conditioning. Metta doesn't add anything new, it clears the dust that covered your original heart. As you practice, the boundary between yourself and others also begins to dissolve. You notice that the way you treat yourself is the way you treat the world. If you're harsh inside, you carry that energy into every interaction. But when you respond to your own suffering with kindness, you become more available to others. You listen better. You judge less. You see the humanity in every face because you've made peace with your own. This doesn't mean you ignore mistakes. It means you stop using them as weapons. You still take responsibility. But you do so with care, not with shame. Loving kindness teaches accountability without cruelty, growth without punishment, change without rejection. Even the language you use with yourself changes. You start to notice the tone of your inner speech, the little moments when you apologize for existing, the way you rush to criticize before anyone else can. Metta gives you a new vocabulary. Not in words, but in energy. You begin to say, I am learning, I am trying, I am enough. In daily life, this practice becomes a refuge. You're not always in formal meditation, but metta becomes part of your breath. When you feel triggered, you pause. You send kindness inward. When you feel ashamed, you place a hand on your heart and whisper care. When the critic rises, you listen, and then respond with truth, not fear, not defense, but truth rooted in compassion. You are not trying to erase the past. You are choosing not to relive it unconsciously. You are building new habits of attention, of response, of emotional presence. And these new habits slowly change the atmosphere of your mind. Metta also helps when you feel stuck, not by pushing you forward, but by removing the inner pressure. It says, you can be still and still be worthy. You can be confused and still be held in care. You don't need to earn this kindness. You only need to accept it. There are moments when the practice will feel mechanical, when the words feel hollow, when the old patterns seem stronger. But this is the nature of any deep transformation. You don't stop because it's hard. You stay. You keep offering. Because with every phrase, with every breath, you are building a new foundation, one rooted in care, not criticism, presence, not perfection. Over time, the space inside you grows. What once felt like a battlefield becomes more like a sanctuary. The wounds are still there, but they're not bleeding. The critic still speaks, but it's no longer the final voice. And in that space, your life begins to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly, deeply, from the inside out. You begin to trust yourself. Not because you always know what to do, but because you know how to return to love when you forget. This trust changes everything. You take more risks. You set healthier boundaries. You stop settling for environments that mirror your old self-judgment. You move in the world with a quieter heart, a softer gaze, a steadier breath. This is what metta toward the self makes possible. Not just relief, but return. A return to the part of you that was never broken. The part that doesn't need fixing, only remembering. And now that you've begun this return, the path ahead becomes clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Because you are no longer walking it alone. You're walking it with the steady company of your own kindness. Let that kindness guide the rest of the journey, breath by breath, word by word. You are not your critic. You are the love that survives it. After you begin to treat yourself with loving kindness, something deeper unfolds. Your inner world starts to soften. The harsh edges of self-judgment slowly round out. You become less reactive to your own imperfections. But soon, another challenge appears, the way you relate to others. It's one thing to be gentle with yourself in silence. It's another to hold that same gentleness in a conversation, in conflict, in the everyday mess of human interaction. This is where the mirror of community becomes essential, not to escape into others, but to see yourself more clearly through them. In Buddhist teachings, the Sangha, the spiritual community, is not just a support system. It is a living mirror. A collective field where the self that you think is stable is constantly reflected, challenged, and softened. Without others, it's easy to believe you've transcended your reactivity. But when someone ignores you, interrupts you, or misunderstands you, your practice is tested. What rises in these moments is not new. It was already there. The Sangha helps you see it. This mirror doesn't work because people are perfect. It works because they aren't. It works because their habits activate your unconscious patterns. When you feel judged, it's a chance to see where you still judge yourself. When you feel excluded, it reveals where you exclude parts of yourself. Community shows you what's unresolved, not through teaching, but through interaction. This reflection is not always comfortable, but it is honest. The presence of others pulls the hidden material to the surface, not to shame you, but to reveal what's ready to be seen. When you react strongly to someone, pause and look inward. What expectation was challenged? What fear was touched? What part of your identity felt threatened? These questions don't push blame outward. They bring the power back to awareness. The Sangha becomes a training ground for this kind of seeing. It's not about always agreeing or always feeling safe. It's about learning to stay open, even when discomfort arises. In many Buddhist monasteries, practitioners live together in silence, not because it's easy, but because it brings out the subtle dynamics of ego. You notice who you avoid, who you feel drawn to, who triggers comparison. These observations are valuable. They are the raw material for awakening. In this way, spiritual community is not a retreat from life. It's a deeper encounter with it. You learn not just through teachings, but through how you listen, how you respond, how you share space. Sangha teaches humility because it reminds you that you are not the center. Your story is not the only story. Your pain is not the only pain. This shift in perspective helps dismantle the illusion of separateness. Practicing in community also reveals the mind's projections, the stories you place onto others, the assumptions you carry. You begin to notice how quickly the mind labels: friendly, distant, difficult. And in seeing this, you begin to question those labels. You start asking what you're bringing to each encounter, whether you're showing up with preconceptions or with presence. This kind of engagement takes patience. It takes courage. Because true community is not about comfort, it's about honesty. When someone reflects something back to you, especially something difficult, it's a gift. Even when it hurts, especially then, because that's where growth lives, in the places you least want to look. In traditional Buddhist practice, there is a structure called Kalyana Mitta, the spiritual friend. This is someone who walks the path with you, not to lead or follow, but to witness, to remind, to reflect. Having such a relationship in Sangha transforms how you hold yourself. You begin to value truth over approval, support over control, presence over performance. The Sangha also offers something you can't give yourself: collective energy. When others practice with sincerity, that energy supports your own practice. When you see someone else facing their pain with honesty, it gives you strength. When someone shares their struggle openly, it dissolves the illusion that you're alone. This shared vulnerability becomes a foundation for trust. And when trust is built, deeper healing becomes possible. You begin to speak more honestly, to listen more deeply, to feel your place in something larger than yourself. In this space, transformation becomes less about effort and more about resonance. You shift because the field around you is shifting too. At the same time, Sangha shows you where you still hide. If you shrink in group spaces, notice what you're protecting. If you feel superior, notice what you're defending. If you feel invisible, ask what story you're still believing about your worth. Each of these insights arises not in isolation, but in relation. And that's the point. Awakening does not happen alone. It happens in connection. Being part of a spiritual community also means learning how to hold others in compassion, even when they're struggling, especially then. You learn to see past someone's behavior and into their suffering. You recognize that just like you, they are trying to find peace. Just like you, they get caught in fear. Just like you, they carry pain they don't know how to express. This understanding becomes the ground for compassion. You stop needing everyone to be easy. You stop expecting perfect harmony. You start valuing truth over smoothness. Because growth is not always graceful. It's often awkward. It's often messy. And the Sangha gives space for that mess to be witnessed without judgment. In this space, forgiveness becomes more natural, not as a spiritual ideal, but as a lived necessity. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you see what clinging does to your own heart. You forgive because you've felt your own sharp edges, and you no longer want to add to the pain. Spiritual community also teaches boundaries, not as rejection, but as wisdom. You learn when to stay silent and when to speak, when to offer help and when to step back. You realize that compassion is not always saying yes. Sometimes it's allowing others to learn in their own time, their own way. This discernment grows through experience, through mistakes, through reflection. And as you engage with Sangha, your view of others starts to change. You stop seeing people as obstacles or allies. You start seeing them as teachers. Every interaction becomes a chance to notice something in yourself, to soften a reaction, to open a little more, to love with less condition. In many Zen traditions, practitioners bow to each other before and after every interaction. This is not a ritual of hierarchy. It's a practice of recognition. I see you. I see your struggle. I see your light. This bow is a moment of reverence, a pause, a return to presence. It reminds you that every being is walking their own difficult path and that you are not separate from them. This sense of non-separation is what the Sangha cultivates. You move from me and them to us, from isolation to shared humanity, from judgment to mutual respect. Not because everyone is easy to love, but because love becomes less about preference and more about practice. The Sangha teaches you that awakening is not just inward, it's relational. It's how you show up, how you respond, how you hold space. You don't need to fix everyone. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You only need to stay true, to stay kind, to stay present. And in that presence, the old ways of relating begin to fall away. You don't need to defend yourself with sarcasm. You don't need to withdraw to feel safe. You don't need to be perfect to be accepted. You simply need to be willing, to be real, to keep showing up. This is how the Sangha becomes not just a community, but a mirror. Not just a group, but a path. It reflects your inner world back to you, so you can see more clearly, love more fully, and let go more completely. You don't have to walk this path alone. You were never meant to. When you begin to open in community, when your walls soften and your defenses fall away, something new becomes visible. The more present you become with others, the more aware you grow of how your choices ripple through them. Every word, every action, every silence carries weight. You begin to feel the subtle effects of what you do, not just on others, but on your own mind. The discomfort of having acted from fear, the quiet unrest that follows dishonesty, the tension that stays in the body when you move against your values. This is the voice of conscience, And it's not asking for punishment, it's asking for alignment. In Buddhism, this alignment is cultivated through sila, ethical conduct. Often misunderstood as a set of rules, sila is not about control or suppression. It is about liberation. It's about clearing the internal landscape so you can sit in silence without being haunted, so you can relate to others without guilt, so you can rest in your own mind without conflict. Ethical conduct is not about being good in a superficial sense. It's about creating the inner conditions that allow peace to arise. The 5 precepts, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and intoxicants, are not commandments. They are training principles. They point toward actions that lead to mental clarity. They guide you away from behaviors that disturb the heart. When followed with awareness, they begin to detox the conscience. The heaviness of regret, the confusion of moral ambiguity, the restless energy of unacknowledged harm, these begin to lift. Every time you act in contradiction to your values, you create friction inside. You might justify it in the moment, but your nervous system records the split. Your heart feels the dissonance, and over time, that dissonance accumulates. It becomes self-doubt, it becomes anxiety, it becomes shame. Ethical living clears that accumulation not through judgment, but through integrity. It says, live in a way that leaves nothing hidden. Sila is powerful because it addresses the source of inner conflict. You don't need to wait until after a harmful action to start cleaning up. You can prevent the harm before it happens. You can catch the impulse before it becomes karma. This proactive mindfulness strengthens your ability to pause. It builds a kind of ethical immunity, not rigid, not reactive, but responsive, grounded, clear. When you live with this kind of awareness, your actions begin to reflect your deepest intentions. You speak not to manipulate, but to connect. You act not to take, but to share. You move through life not as someone trying to prove worth, but as someone embodying wisdom. And in that embodiment, remorse fades, not because you never err, but because you're willing to see when you do and make amends. Sila doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. It asks you to stop hiding behind excuses, to stop numbing the conscience with distraction, to face the discomfort of your own missteps, and respond with responsibility, not avoidance. In this way, ethics becomes an ongoing process of purification, a way of living that continually removes the blocks to joy. This purification is not abstract. You feel it in the body. You notice how certain actions leave you feeling lighter, while others leave residue. You start to choose differently, not because you're afraid of punishment, but because you've tasted what peace feels like, and you don't want to pollute that space. One of the most overlooked aspects of Sila is its psychological effect. Guilt and shame often masquerade as personal flaws, but many times they are simply the mind's natural response to acting out of alignment. Instead of pathologizing these emotions, Buddhist ethics teaches you to examine them. Did I harm? Was I careless? Did I speak truthfully? When the answer is yes, the response is not self-condemnation. It is a return, a gentle correction, a redirection toward integrity. Practicing Sila over time also builds trust with yourself and with others. When you live ethically, people feel safer around you. They know you will not betray their vulnerability. They sense the stability in your presence, and perhaps most importantly, you begin to trust yourself. You no longer second-guess every choice. You no longer wonder if your actions reflect your values. They do. And that consistency becomes strength. This kind of trust cannot be faked. It is built moment by moment, decision by decision, and it is strengthened in difficulty, not ease. When you want to speak harshly, but choose patience. When you feel tempted to deceive, but tell the truth. When you could act out of selfishness, but choose generosity. These moments build inner dignity, not pride, but quiet self-respect. Ethics also provides a compass when clarity fades. In emotionally charged situations, the mind becomes reactive. The ego takes control, but a strong ethical foundation serves as a guide. It reminds you what matters. It gives you something to lean into when your emotions pull you off course. You don't have to figure everything out in the moment. You can return to your principles. In this way, sila becomes not a burden, but a refuge, a structure that holds you when everything else feels unstable. And in this structure, your conscience breathes. It no longer needs to shout to get your attention. It can rest, because it knows you are listening. This listening becomes part of meditation. When you sit, the body remembers. If your actions have been misaligned, the mind will show you. Thoughts may surface, regrets may appear, and you meet them not with defense, but with understanding. You allow the discomfort, you let it speak, and then you return to the present, not to escape, but to re-anchor. This process makes meditation deeper. When your ethical foundation is strong, the mind settles more easily. There is less tension, less resistance, less avoidance. You are not trying to cover something up. You are simply here, breathing, resting in the clean space your conduct has created. Sila also aligns you with the deeper currents of compassion. You begin to see how your choices affect the collective. Your actions ripple through others' lives. Your words plant seeds in their minds. And this responsibility becomes not heavy, but sacred. You carry it with care. You move through life not as a separate being, but as part of a larger web. This shifts your motivation. You stop asking, "What do I want?" You start asking, "What brings harmony?" Harmony here does not mean avoidance. It means right action. It means knowing when to speak truth, even when it's hard. It means knowing when to be quiet, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. It means seeing your own motives clearly and choosing not to act on the ones that come from ego. This clarity extends into every area of life. In relationships, ethics becomes a commitment to honesty and presence. In work, it becomes a guide for fairness and integrity. In conflict, it becomes a path back to peace. Ethics does not limit your freedom, it refines it. It helps you choose from your higher self, not your conditioned one. And over time, this way of living becomes natural. It no longer feels like effort. It feels like flow, because there is less friction, less regret, less inner contradiction. You stop wasting energy managing guilt. You stop needing to explain your actions. You simply live in truth. This truthfulness becomes a quiet power. It doesn't boast. It doesn't argue. It just is. And it radiates. People feel it in your presence. You feel it in your breath. The mind becomes less divided. The heart becomes more open. And the conscience becomes clear, not because you've silenced it, but because you've honored it. Let this become your path, not a rigid moral code, but a living practice. A practice that brings your actions, your speech, your thoughts into harmony with your deepest wisdom. A practice that frees you from the endless loop of self-judgment. A practice that returns you again and again to the peace that comes from living cleanly, kindly, clearly. This is the strength of Sila, not in its rules, but in its freedom, not in its restriction, but in its release. Let that freedom guide your next step. Let it shape your presence. Let it clear the way forward, not with force, but with the stillness that comes when the heart is finally at ease. When your life begins to align with ethics, when your actions reflect your values, something subtle but powerful unfolds. The mind begins to settle, not just in meditation, but in the middle of daily life. The weight of regret lifts, the confusion of moral ambiguity clears, and in this clarity, a deeper truth starts to rise to the surface. Everything you've worked to hold on to is still changing. No matter how well you live, how mindfully you act, nothing stays. The people you love, the roles you fill, the feelings you chase, they all move. And the more you try to freeze them, the more suffering you create. This is where the next doorway opens, the direct experience of impermanence. Impermanence, or anicca, is not a theory. It's not something to debate or define. It is the most intimate truth of your life. The breath comes and goes. The heart expands and contracts. Thoughts arise and pass. Emotions swell and fade. The body ages. Seasons shift. Relationships evolve. Every moment is a reminder that what begins will end. What forms will dissolve. What is gained will be lost. But this isn't a sentence. It's an opening. Clinging is what creates pain. Not because things change, but because you expected them not to. You held on to the good moments. You resisted the bad ones. You tried to control what was never meant to be fixed. This resistance creates tension, a tightness in the chest, a pressure in the mind, and the only true relief comes when you release the grip, not through force, but through understanding. Understanding impermanence doesn't make you passive. It makes you wise. It teaches you to love without attachment, to feel deeply without drowning, to show up fully without trying to possess the moment. Because you know the truth. Everything is already moving. Every moment is already dissolving. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care without clinging. You appreciate what's here, not because it will last, but because it won't. This shift changes your relationship with joy. It becomes more vivid, more immediate. You don't take it for granted. You don't postpone gratitude. You open to the fullness of the moment, knowing it's already passing. And when loss comes, and it will, you're not destroyed. You're not untouched, but you're not shattered. You know that pain is part of change, that grief is part of love. You stop seeing endings as failures. You start seeing them as the natural arc of experience. This softens your fear. It quiets your anxiety. It makes space for peace. Not because life is easy, but because you're no longer fighting it. Practicing with impermanence begins with attention. You watch the breath. You feel it rise, stay for a moment, and fall away. You don't try to hold it. You don't resist it. You let it move. This simple act becomes a training in letting go. Every breath is a teacher. Every exhale is a release. You apply this to thoughts. When a difficult thought arises, you don't cling to it. You don't try to stop it. You just watch. It grows. It peaks. It dissolves. You see how even the most painful thought is temporary. You see how even the most powerful craving fades. This observation builds trust, not in the content of the mind, but in the process, in the truth that everything moves. You extend this to emotions. You feel sadness, and instead of pushing it away, you allow it. You feel joy, and instead of trying to hold it, you experience it fully. You let each emotion come and go like weather. You stop confusing your mood with your identity. You stop reacting to every wave. You start resting in the space that holds the waves. This resting changes your experience of time. You stop rushing. You stop clinging to the future. You stop replaying the past. You meet what's here. You let it pass. You meet the next moment. You let that one go too. This isn't detachment in a cold sense. It's freedom in the warmest sense, because you're no longer resisting the way life naturally moves. Understanding impermanence also helps you face aging. You see the body changing, the skin loosening, the strength shifting, and instead of denying it, you bow to it. You honor the impermanence of your form as part of its beauty. You stop chasing youth. You stop resisting time. You begin to live in rhythm with reality. You also begin to meet death differently. Not just the death of people you love, but the little deaths of identity, of routine, of certainty. These endings no longer scare you. They teach you. They show you what matters. They strip away what's false. They bring you into what's real. In Buddhist practice, meditating on death is not morbid. It is liberating. It reminds you that you don't have time to waste, that nothing is promised, that each word you speak, each action you take matters, because it may be your last. This doesn't make you anxious. It makes you awake. When you integrate impermanence, your relationships change. You no longer cling to roles. You no longer expect people to stay the same. You allow others to change, to grow, to move on. You hold them with love, not possession. And because of that, your love becomes more honest, less needy, more generous. You start to release the idea that things must work out a certain way, that life must follow your plan. You stop measuring success by what lasts. You start measuring it by how present you are while it happens. This changes your goals. It changes your definition of progress. It brings peace, even in uncertainty. You no longer see impermanence as something to be solved. You see it as the very nature of reality, and that insight dissolves fear at the root. Because what you feared was not change itself, but your resistance to it. Letting go doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without grasping. It means showing up with everything you have, knowing it will pass, and loving it all the more because of that. This is not weakness. It's strength. It takes courage to stay open in a world that keeps moving. It takes wisdom to embrace what you cannot hold. When fear arises, you meet it with this understanding. You say to yourself, this too is impermanent. When joy visits, you welcome it with open hands. When grief returns, you make room for it without collapsing. Each experience becomes part of the path. Each moment becomes part of the training. This practice is not about escaping emotion. It's about becoming spacious enough to hold all of it without being consumed. That spaciousness is not something you create. It's something you uncover by letting go. Impermanence does not make life meaningless. It makes it meaningful. It reminds you that this conversation, this smile, this breath matters, because it will never come again. It invites you to stop sleepwalking, to stop waiting for later, to live here, now. And when you live like this, peace is no longer a goal. It becomes a quality of presence, a result of alignment, a natural outcome of moving with life instead of against it. You don't need to force yourself to be okay with change. You just need to see it clearly, to feel it directly, to let it teach you what permanence never could. That freedom isn't in holding on. It's in knowing you don't need to. And from this knowing, something new arises. Not detachment, but connection. Not indifference, but depth. You begin to love more fully, not because it will last, but because it won't. Let this understanding guide you. Let it soften the fear. Let it loosen the grip. Everything you need to let go of is already moving. Everything you think will last is already passing, and that's not a loss. That's your freedom. After surrendering to impermanence, something inside softens even further. You stop trying to trap life in containers. You stop expecting permanence where there is none. You've started to understand that clinging is not safety, and letting go is not loss. It's the natural flow of everything. But now, another question arises in the quiet that follows release. What do you live for if everything is always moving? What gives shape to your path when you no longer chase security or grasp at identity? In Buddhism, the answer is not about self-fulfillment. It's about turning outward. It's about becoming a source of liberation for others. This is the Bodhisattva ideal. The Bodhisattva does not seek awakening just for themselves. They vow to awaken for the sake of all beings. Not because they feel superior, not because they want recognition, but because they see clearly that there is no real separation. Your healing is not complete until you include others in it. Your wisdom is not fully mature until it becomes service. Paradoxically, this outward turn lightens your inner pain. When you stop making your own suffering the center of everything, it begins to loosen. Not because it disappears, but because you've changed its role. It becomes fuel instead of weight. It becomes the very reason you can relate to others with tenderness. The very reason you understand what it means to hurt and to keep walking anyway. The Bodhisattva path does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be willing. Willing to keep your heart open even when it aches. Willing to keep showing up even when it feels like nothing is changing. Willing to make your path not just about survival, but about service. This intention doesn't remove your wounds. It transforms them into wisdom. You may still carry the scars of past trauma. You may still hear the echoes of old doubt. But now, these are not signs of failure. They are reminders of your capacity to hold others in their own struggle. When you walk the Bodhisattva path, your pain is not a barrier. It becomes a bridge. Every time you choose to meet someone with compassion instead of judgment, you are embodying this path. Every time you respond to harm with awareness rather than reaction, you are living it. It's not about dramatic acts. It's about everyday choices. It's how you speak, how you listen, how you show up with presence in the ordinary moments that most people overlook. And yet, the Bodhisattva vow is not passive. It calls for courage, to see suffering and not turn away, to stay steady when others collapse, to act when action is needed, not out of ego, but out of love. This strength does not come from detachment. It comes from connection, from the deep knowing that all beings are seeking peace, even if they don't know how to find it. When you dedicate your practice to others, your own healing accelerates, because you're no longer trapped in the small self. You're no longer asking, "What do I need to feel better?" You're asking, "How can I help someone else not suffer in the way I did?" That shift expands your perspective. It gives your wounds a purpose. It frees you from the loop of self-centered pain. This path also teaches you not to wait until you're fully healed before you serve. You serve as you heal. You share what you can where you are, because someone else is where you once were, and your presence, your honesty, your humility can become the light they need to see their own way forward. The Bodhisattva path also includes fierce compassion. This is not about being soft all the time. It's about doing what's needed, even when it's uncomfortable, setting boundaries, speaking truth, protecting others. You are not here to be agreeable. You are here to be awake. And sometimes that means disappointing others to stay aligned with what is right. As your vow deepens, you start to feel a sense of inner resilience. Not because life gets easier, but because you know what you're anchored in. You're not chasing temporary highs. You're rooted in purpose. Your actions become more intentional, your choices more mindful, your presence more impactful. This is not idealism. It is lived reality. The Bodhisattva is not a mystical being from ancient texts. The Bodhisattva is you. Every time you choose to keep your heart open in a difficult moment. Every time you offer kindness without expecting anything back. Every time you use your own pain as a compass for compassion. This path also teaches equanimity. You learn to give without attachment to results, to serve without needing praise, to offer your time, energy, and love, knowing that not all seeds will sprout in your lifetime, but they will sprout somewhere for someone. That's enough. You begin to notice the subtle ways your own suffering softens when you're not focused solely on it. You realize that empathy isn't about absorbing others' pain. It's about being present with it. Being a space where suffering can be seen, held, and slowly released. This presence is your offering. It doesn't require words or solutions, just the willingness to stay. The Bodhisattva vow also transforms how you handle your own emotions. When anger arises, you ask, "How can I understand this more deeply so I don't pass it on?" When fear appears, you hold it with the same tenderness you'd offer a frightened child. You stop rejecting parts of yourself. You begin to include everything in your compassion, especially the difficult parts. This inclusion changes how you relate to others. You stop needing people to be perfect. You stop trying to fix them. You see their behavior as expressions of unmet needs, unhealed pain, and misdirected longing. And instead of reacting, you meet them with grounded awareness. This doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means responding from clarity rather than conditioning. As you embody this path more fully, you realize that the world does not need your perfection. It needs your presence. It needs people willing to act from love, even when it's inconvenient. Willing to face their own shadows so they don't project them onto others. Willing to stay with what's hard so others know they're not alone. The Bodhisattva does not wait until conditions are perfect. They begin where they are. They use the life they've been given. The joys, the losses, the wounds, all of it becomes part of their path. Nothing is wasted. Everything is transformed. When you walk this path, you stop asking what you can get. You start asking what you can give, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because giving becomes the most natural expression of who you are. You've cleared enough of the debris. You've let go of enough illusions. Now, your very being becomes a source of benefit. This path is not about being heroic. It's about being real. It's about being willing to keep going even when it's hard, to keep loving even when it hurts, to keep trusting that your small acts matter, because they do. Let this ideal live in your heart, not as pressure, but as guidance, not as a standard you must meet, but as a light you can follow. Let it remind you why you practice, why you heal, why you keep showing up, not just for yourself, but for all beings. Because when you walk for them, you are never alone, and neither are they. When your life becomes an offering, when your wounds begin to serve something greater than your own healing, the way you move through the world transforms. Every choice carries more weight, not as a burden, but as a responsibility guided by clarity. You begin to realize that your liberation is no longer separate from how you affect others. And in that realization, something subtle begins to shift. You start to pay closer attention to what you allow into your mind, because just as your actions leave an imprint on others, what you absorb leaves an imprint on you. Everything you take in, through your eyes, your ears, your attention, shapes the state of your mind. Not just the obvious things like entertainment or conversations, but even the tone, energy, and subtle messages of the environments you engage with. In Buddhism, this is understood through the lens of mental karma. Karma doesn't only come from what you do, it also comes from what you internalize. What you repeatedly absorb becomes what you unconsciously become. This is why mindful consumption matters. It's not about cutting yourself off from the world. It's about being conscious of what you let enter the gates of your perception. Every piece of media, every article you read, every video you watch carries an energetic tone. If you consume content that's rooted in fear, division, aggression, or cynicism, that tone begins to color your thoughts. Even if you don't agree with it, the repetition affects your baseline. It adds to the noise inside. The mind is porous. It doesn't always filter what is harmful from what is helpful. It absorbs what is repeated. It gets conditioned by what you pay attention to. This is why it's important not to treat what you consume casually. Just as you would protect your body from spoiled food, you must protect your mind from mental toxins. Mindful consumption begins with awareness, noticing how certain forms of content leave you feeling heavier, how certain conversations leave your body tense, how certain environments pull you into agitation or distraction. These effects are subtle, but they accumulate, and unless they are seen clearly, they begin to form the background of your life. Start by asking yourself simple questions. What kind of mental states does this content encourage? Does it bring clarity or confusion? Does it feed compassion or resentment? Does it leave me feeling more grounded or more reactive? These questions are not meant to create guilt. They are meant to restore choice. One of the most overlooked sources of mental karma is casual speech. Conversations that revolve around gossip, judgment, or superficiality may seem harmless, but they leave a trace. They pull the mind into comparison, anxiety, and attachment to opinion. Being mindful in speech includes being mindful in listening. When you stay in conversations that go against your values, even passively, your silence can become participation. Stepping back from such interactions is not rejection, it's preservation of clarity. This doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means choosing environments that nourish your inner life, people who reflect your aspirations, conversations that encourage depth, words that carry intention. You begin to notice that after certain encounters, your heart feels more open. After others, it feels guarded. That contrast is your compass. Another form of consumption is self-talk. The narratives you repeat, the identities you reinforce, the judgments you silently affirm. These are absorbed with the same impact as external voices. What you say to yourself when you're alone is often more powerful than anything someone else could say. If the inner voice is shaped by content that feeds insecurity, the result is predictable. Your sense of self shrinks. Your mental energy becomes drained. But if that voice is shaped by awareness, compassion, and clarity, the opposite happens. You grow in steadiness. You begin to trust your inner life. To purify the mind, you don't have to remove everything negative overnight. You start by reducing what is unnecessary. You pause before reaching for another piece of content. You take a moment of silence instead. You read something that uplifts rather than overwhelms. You listen to voices that point toward wisdom rather than chaos. These small shifts recalibrate the mind. Another part of mindful consumption is recognizing how habits of stimulation distort your nervous system. Constant exposure to fast, loud, or emotionally charged media keeps the mind in a heightened state. It becomes difficult to rest, to focus, or to feel subtle joy. Simpler experiences, like watching the breath, listening to the wind, or having a quiet moment, lose their appeal because the mind has been trained to seek intensity. Reversing this takes patience. It requires weaning off of overstimulation and relearning how to be nourished by stillness. Even the background noise matters. What plays while you work, cook, or commute still enters the mind. If it's filled with fear, negativity, or fragmentation, those qualities silently shape your inner world. Replacing this background with silence, nature sounds, or teachings that bring wisdom makes a difference. The mind does not need constant input. It needs meaningful input, or sometimes none at all. Mindful consumption also applies to physical space. The visual environment, the energy of the room, the colors, the clutter, all affect the mind. A messy, chaotic environment sends messages of disorder. A simple, intentional space supports calm and attention. This is not about aesthetics alone. It's about what your surroundings are whispering to your subconscious day after day. In Buddhist monastic settings, great care is taken in creating a space that supports inner stillness. Not for beauty, but for practice. Every object has its place. Every activity is done with awareness. This principle can be brought into your own life. You don't need to live in a monastery to create a peaceful environment. You simply need to become more intentional with what surrounds you. Technology, though powerful, requires particular mindfulness. Endless scrolling, constant alerts, and fragmented attention retrain the brain to be reactive rather than reflective. Mindful use of technology means setting limits, creating digital boundaries, choosing when to engage and when to step back. Not every message needs an instant response. Not every thought deserves to be broadcast. Discipline in digital life restores mental clarity. Another aspect, often ignored, is energetic consumption. This refers to the subtle impact of the moods, emotions, and energies around you. Being in spaces filled with anger or fear affects your system, even if no words are exchanged. This is not about blaming others. It's about becoming sensitive enough to know when your own inner state is being altered and taking steps to return to center. Practices like grounding, breathing, and stepping into nature help reset this balance. Purifying what you take in doesn't mean rejecting the world. It means choosing what allows you to stay awake in the world. It means recognizing that your attention is precious, that what you consume is not passive, it is practice. Every moment you spend engaging with something either deepens your suffering or supports your freedom. Mindful consumption also cultivates joy. When your mind is not overfed with confusion and clutter, it becomes more receptive to beauty. Small things bring delight. A moment of kindness, a single flower, a quiet sunset. These experiences do not need to compete with chaos for your attention. They become sufficient on their own. As your consumption becomes more mindful, your output changes too. What you say, how you act, how you respond to others, all of it begins to reflect a more settled mind. You speak with more care, you listen with more presence, you stop reacting to everything as if it's urgent. You begin to live in rhythm with what actually matters. This is not about avoiding difficulty. It's about reducing what is unnecessary, so you have the energy to meet difficulty with strength. You stop feeding the mind things that weaken it. You start choosing what aligns with your practice. This is a form of compassion toward yourself and toward others. In Buddhist teachings, right consumption is an extension of right intention. You don't take in what numbs. You take in what supports awakening. You let go of the habit of distraction. You move toward presence, not with harshness, but with care, because what you take in becomes what you live from, and what you live from becomes what you offer to the world. Let your intake be a reflection of your highest values. Let it clear the space within you for peace to arise. Let it support your path, not just by avoiding harm, but by inviting clarity, stillness, and joy. What enters the mind shapes the mind. Let what enters be chosen with awareness. Let your inner space be treated as sacred. Because everything you consume becomes part of who you are becoming. When you begin to purify what enters your mind, when you take responsibility for what you absorb and allow your attention to rest in nourishing places, something deep inside stabilizes. The mind becomes quieter, less reactive. The emotions lose some of their sharp edges. You begin to realize that many of your struggles came not from what happened, but from what you unconsciously fed yourself again and again. With clearer input, the inner environment becomes more honest. And in that honesty, one truth stands above all others. This life is not permanent. Every breath you take is one closer to your last. Every moment that passes is one you will never live again. And when this is not just a poetic idea, but a living awareness, it changes everything. This is the practice of Maranasati, the contemplation of death. It is not meant to frighten you or to push you into despair. It is meant to clarify. It is meant to dissolve illusion and return the mind to what truly matters. Most suffering comes from the belief that there is always more time, more chances, more tomorrow. That belief makes you postpone joy. It makes you carry resentment for years. It keeps you stuck in small dramas as if they are permanent stories. But when death becomes real in your awareness, those dramas begin to fall away. The urgency to defend your ego, to prove your point, to win every argument fades. Because death is not impressed with your victories. It's not waiting for your perfect plans. It will come whether you are ready or not. To meditate on death is not to be morbid. It is to be fully alive. Because only those who understand impermanence can appreciate presence. When you truly grasp that your time is limited, your priorities change. The things that drain your spirit no longer hold power. The people you love become more precious. The moment you're in becomes more than enough. Maranasati invites you to reflect on the simple fact that your body will stop breathing. Your name will be forgotten. Your possessions will pass to others. Your successes and failures will dissolve. And when everything you've used to define yourself is stripped away, what remains? That question is not abstract. It is the most important question of your life. Contemplating death does not cause fear. It reveals the fear that was already there. The fear of being out of control, the fear of losing what you love, the fear of meaninglessness. But instead of avoiding these fears, the practice turns toward them. It sits with them. It breathes with them. And slowly, something shifts. You begin to see that fear does not have the final word. Awareness does. This awareness brings clarity. It shows you where you've been wasting time, where you've been seeking validation instead of living truth, where you've been making decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. Death contemplation brings these patterns to the surface, not to shame you, but to free you from them. You begin to ask different questions. If I had one day left, who would I forgive? What would I stop holding back? What would I stop pretending to be? These are not hypothetical questions. They are doorways. Every honest answer brings you closer to freedom. When you remember death, small problems become small again. The ego's negativity loses its grip. That voice in your head that criticizes, compares, complains, it quiets when you realize none of its stories will survive your last breath. Suddenly, there is space. Space for forgiveness. Space for gratitude. Space for choosing love over pride. Meditating on death also deepens your compassion. You start to see that everyone you meet is on the same journey. Everyone will lose everything. Everyone will grieve. Everyone will say goodbye. This shared reality softens your judgments. It opens your heart. You become slower to react, quicker to listen. You stop expecting perfection. You start offering kindness because you know it may be your last chance. In Buddhist tradition, monks are often encouraged to meditate in cemeteries or reflect on corpses, not to glorify decay, but to dissolve illusion, to see directly that this body is not who you are, that no appearance is permanent, that what you are clinging to will change, no matter how tightly you hold it. This is not cruelty, it is compassion, because only when you stop clinging to the impermanent can you begin to rest in what is unchanging. Maranasati is also a powerful tool for cutting through procrastination. The mind loves to delay, to plan endlessly, to wait for the perfect conditions. But death does not wait. And when this truth is alive in your practice, you begin to act with integrity now. You stop postponing love. You stop avoiding hard conversations. You stop numbing yourself with distractions. You live like someone who knows that time is precious. This awareness doesn't lead to urgency in a frantic sense. It leads to depth. You don't rush, you prioritize. You don't panic, you become present. You no longer chase endless desires because you see where they lead. You simplify, you focus. You start offering your attention to what truly nourishes the heart. In daily life, you can bring Maranasati into simple routines. Before sleep, reflect on the truth that this day will never come again. With each breath, remember that one day your breath will stop. When you feel anger rise, pause and ask, if I knew I would die tomorrow, would this still matter? These small practices bring you closer to the root of wisdom, and that wisdom does not lead to sadness. It leads to appreciation. You stop needing things to be perfect. You start feeling grateful that they are here at all. Every cup of tea, every shared moment, every quiet breath becomes sacred, not because they last, but because they don't. Death contemplation also brings perspective when life becomes overwhelming. When challenges seem too big, when loss feels unbearable, when fear threatens to consume you, remembering death helps you return to what matters. It reminds you that life is a brief spark, that joy and sorrow are both part of it, that you are not here to be invincible, you are here to be awake. This kind of awakening is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is steady, humble. It changes how you show up in ordinary moments. You start saying, I love you, more often. You listen more fully. You stop trying to win arguments and start trying to understand. You stop rushing through your life and start arriving in it. Maranasati also changes how you relate to legacy. You begin to ask, what am I leaving behind? not in terms of achievement, but in terms of presence. What energy did I bring into the world? What did I help others feel? How did I live when no one was watching? These questions shape how you live today. There is no fear that can survive direct contact with death, because when death is no longer a stranger, life becomes more vivid, more honest, more full. You are no longer living under the illusion that you have forever. And that is where freedom begins. You are not meant to be fearless. You are meant to be clear. And clarity comes from remembering what is real. Death is real. Loss is real. And because of that, love must be real too. Presence must be real. Every conscious moment becomes a miracle, not because it's easy, but because it's true. Let Maranasati be a reminder. Let it sharpen your attention. Let it dissolve what doesn't matter. Let it reveal the stillness beneath the noise. You don't have to wait for tragedy to remember what is sacred. You can remember now. Live as if your time matters. Speak as if your words matter. Love as if it all ends, because it does. And in that ending, something eternal awakens. Not the ego, not the name, but the part of you that knows how to be here fully, without regret. That knowing is your practice, and it starts by remembering what most try to forget. When the truth of death becomes part of your awareness, life becomes clearer, not lighter in burden, but lighter in confusion. You begin to see what actually matters, not in theory, but in the lived texture of your days. You no longer move from distraction to distraction. You begin to speak with intention, act with honesty, and feel with fewer defenses. But even with this clarity, you may notice something still lingering beneath the surface, an energetic heaviness. It's not just mental thought or emotional tension. It's a vibration that feels lodged in the body, beyond explanation, beyond analysis. This is where words fall short and sound becomes the medicine. Chanting and mantra are among the most ancient and direct tools in Buddhist practice for breaking through subtle layers of resistance. They do not rely on logic or explanation. They work through vibration, rhythm, and repetition. They enter places the thinking mind cannot reach and loosen the knots that have held for years. While mindfulness and insight allow you to observe and understand, sound allows you to cleanse and release. In Buddhist traditions, both Theravada and Mahayana, as well as Vajrayana, mantras and chants are seen as vehicles for transforming consciousness at its root level. When recited with sincerity, they begin to shift the energetic field within and around you. The vibrations resonate in your cells, your breath, your nervous system. Even when you don't understand the literal meaning, your whole being responds to the frequency. It's not about belief, it's about resonance. Sound is one of the earliest forms of healing. Before there was language, there was vibration. Before there was form, there was tone, and the body remembers. You may not recall every thought you've had, but your system retains the residue of emotional and energetic patterns. Some of this residue cannot be released through talking or thinking. It needs to be vibrated out. Chanting becomes a way of dislodging what has been frozen. One of the most widely used chants in Mahayana Buddhism is the Heart Sutra mantra, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgat, Bodhisvaha. This mantra is not a spell. It is a map. Its meaning is layered, but in essence, it speaks of going beyond. Beyond fear, beyond clinging, beyond illusion. It points to the empty nature of all phenomena, not in a cold way, but in a liberating way. When chanted with focus, it helps dissolve attachment to form and opens a doorway into the vastness of awareness. The rhythm of this mantra, especially when recited slowly and steadily, begins to create a field of stillness. The mind cannot hold on to its usual noise while keeping pace with the mantra. Thought slows, breath deepens, and something shifts, not in content, but in tone. The energetic state becomes less constricted, more open, more fluid. This is not wishful thinking. It is direct experience. Another potent example from the Vajrayana tradition is the Vajrayogini mantra, Om Ah Hung Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung. This mantra is a powerful tool for cutting through subtle forms of ego and attachment. Vajrayogini represents the fierce, awakened feminine energy that burns away illusion with uncompromising clarity. Her mantra is not soft. It is electric. It activates a force within you that does not tolerate self-deception. Chanting this mantra is not about becoming someone else. It is about uncovering the fire that already lives inside you. The part of you that can see clearly and act without hesitation. The part that knows how to transform pain into wisdom without bypassing its truth. The vibration of this mantra reaches into the dense corners of your psyche and begins to loosen old karmic impressions. You don't need to understand how it works because you are participating with your whole being. Mantra practice is not dependent on having a beautiful voice or a perfect pronunciation. What matters is your sincerity. The energy behind the sound carries more weight than the sound itself. The voice becomes an instrument, not of performance, but of purification. You speak the syllables not just with your mouth, but with your intention. Consistency is what deepens the practice. A few minutes daily can shift your entire inner landscape over time. It is not about the number of recitations, it is about the quality of attention. When the mind wanders, you return to the sound. When resistance arises, you breathe into it and keep chanting. Over time, this process begins to build a field of stability within you, something that no longer gets shaken by every emotion or external disturbance. The vibrational impact of mantra also interacts with the body directly. It stimulates specific points in the nervous system. The tongue, lips, and breath work together to activate meridians and energy centers. This physical engagement is why chanting can often produce a sense of grounding, warmth, or emotional release, even without understanding the deeper meaning of the words. Group chanting amplifies this effect. When multiple voices align in a shared rhythm and tone, something collective is activated. The boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. You feel carried by the sound. You feel less separate. And this sense of connection becomes healing in itself, not because it comes from agreement, but because it arises from resonance. Different mantras have different effects. Some open the heart, some calm the mind, others invoke clarity, power, or protection. The mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, associated with Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, invokes the quality of unconditional love. Its repetition softens the hardness around the heart. It dissolves judgment. It brings a sense of gentleness that can be deeply needed when you're caught in inner conflict. When practicing mantra, it helps to create a simple ritual space. Light a candle. Sit comfortably. Begin slowly, allowing the sound to rise from the belly, not the throat. Breathe naturally. Let the sound guide the breath, not the other way around. If emotion arises, let it move through. If silence calls, let it be there. There is no need to push. The mantra is the vehicle. You only need to ride it. Over time, mantras become internalized. Even when you are not chanting aloud, they echo in your awareness. You begin to hear them in moments of anxiety or stress. They return like an anchor. They become a refuge in difficult situations. The sound continues, even in silence. This is how chanting disrupts negative patterns, not by suppression, but by resonance. It doesn't argue with the ego. It simply overrides its frequency. It shifts the vibrational field from within, and once your inner field shifts, the outer experience begins to respond differently. You become less reactive. You respond with more space. The same challenges appear, but they no longer define you. In this sense, mantra becomes a form of meditation, a focused, embodied meditation that trains the mind to return to the present. That cleanses the inner mirror, that steadies the attention, and in doing so, reveals a more truthful version of your own mind. Chanting also connects you with lineage. The mantras you recite have been recited for centuries. They carry the momentum of millions of practitioners who have walked the path before you. When you chant, you are not alone. You are joining a river that has been flowing for lifetimes, and that connection brings strength, especially in moments when you feel weak. You can explore which mantras speak most deeply to your heart. There is no one right choice. The sound that resonates with you is the sound that heals you. Trust your intuition. Let the vibration choose you. Begin where you are and grow from there. Chanting is not a shortcut. It is not a magical fix. It is a practice. But its power lies in how it bypasses the mind's defenses and reaches into the deeper layers of consciousness. Over time, it builds an inner resonance that no longer matches the frequency of negativity. And when the frequencies no longer match, the negativity falls away on its own. Let chanting be a part of your daily return to presence, to clarity, to the part of you that is already free, waiting only for your attention to return home. You do not need to fight what is difficult. You only need to vibrate at a frequency that allows the difficult to transform. And sound, when used with care, does just that. As sound begins to soften the grip of inner resistance, something buried even deeper starts to stir. The vibrations have disrupted old patterns, cleared mental noise, and loosened the tight structures that once felt immovable. But in the silence that follows, a new voice may rise, subtle, familiar, and persistent. The voice that questions your worth, that doubts your progress, that tells you to give up. This is not just habit or memory. It is something more cunning, more strategic. In Buddhist teachings, it is called Mara. Mara is not a myth to be dismissed as superstition. Mara is a mirror, a symbol for the forces within you that sabotage awakening. The part of the mind that clings to identity, fears loss of control, and whispers defeat when you're closest to transformation. Mara appeared to the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, not with violence, but with illusion, temptation, and doubt. And he still appears, not from outside, but from within your own consciousness. Understanding Mara is essential, because no matter how clear your insight, how deep your stillness, there will always be resistance. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because change threatens the patterns that ego depends on. When old identities begin to dissolve, Mara comes to protect them. He does not shout. He suggests. He distracts. He tells half-truths that feel comfortable. He offers escape routes masked as logic. The first form Mara often takes is doubt. Not intellectual doubt, but existential uncertainty. The kind that says, "Who do you think you are to walk this path?" It questions your capacity, your worth, your intentions. This doubt isn't about truth, it's about fear. It rises precisely when you're expanding, because growth is unstable, and Mara thrives in instability. The antidote is not to argue with the doubt, but to meet it with awareness, to see it as a conditioned voice, not a fact. Another form is procrastination. Mara doesn't need to stop your path entirely, just delay it. He tells you there's always tomorrow, that the practice can wait, that you're not ready yet. This subtle voice keeps you in preparation mode forever. You become a student of the path, but never a participant. Overcoming this, Mara means acting despite uncertainty, choosing presence over perfection, stepping into the moment even when it feels inconvenient or messy. Mara also disguises himself as comparison, the voice that measures your progress against others. That tells you you're falling behind, that insists you must keep up to be worthy. This form of resistance keeps you trapped in constant evaluation. Instead of resting in your own experience, you're pulled into performance. The path becomes something to compete in rather than to embody. Releasing this Mara means remembering that awakening is not linear and not personal. It's not about being better, it's about being real. Another form is the inner critic, a voice shaped by shame and fear. It pretends to be helpful, but its purpose is to keep you small. It warns against risk. It punishes imperfection. It feeds on guilt. This voice is often built over years, inherited from external judgment, and internalized so deeply it feels like truth. But when seen clearly, it begins to unravel. The way to face this Mara is not with silence, but with loving defiance. You practice kindness toward yourself, not because you believe you deserve it, but because you are undoing a system that never gave it to you. There is also the Mara of distraction, the mind pulled toward stimulation, novelty, and escape. It doesn't want stillness, because stillness reveals too much. So it craves noise, activity, endless motion. This Mara keeps you busy while convincing you that you're progressing. But busyness is not presence. Overcoming this requires discipline, not punishment, but structure, creating space for silence, returning to breath, saying no to what pulls you away from your center. Mara also works through fear, especially fear of emptiness. As you begin to let go of identity, preference, and story, A vast space opens inside. That space can feel terrifying. The ego has no script for it. And so Mara enters with panic. He tells you something's wrong, that you must return to what's familiar, that awakening is dangerous. But what he's really afraid of is freedom. Your job is to stay, to feel the fear and not react. To let the discomfort pass without grabbing onto a story. Facing Mara is not a one-time battle. It is ongoing. He returns in different forms, wearing different masks, sometimes as logic, sometimes as urgency, sometimes as fatigue. Your work is not to defeat him with force, but to recognize him with clarity. The moment you name him, his power weakens, because Mara only survives in darkness. He thrives in hiding. The Buddha didn't argue with Mara. He didn't try to prove anything. He simply saw through the illusion. In some stories, he touched the earth as witness. This gesture reminds you that your truth doesn't need validation, that your path doesn't need approval, that your presence is enough. This kind of presence becomes your strength. You develop the capacity to sit with the voices that arise and not obey them. You listen without believing. You feel without reacting. You stay centered even as the mind storms. That is true power, not control, but unwavering attention. Mara will try to pull you away from practice by reminding you of your failures. He'll say, "You've fallen too many times. You're not who you used to be. You've lost your way." But you don't need to respond. You simply return, over and over, to the breath, to the body, to this moment. The return itself is victory. Recognizing Mara also helps you be gentler with others. When you see their reactivity, you remember your own. You don't take their harshness personally because you know what it's like to be caught in confusion. You stop fighting them. You start seeing the Mara in them too, and you meet it with the same clarity and compassion. The mind wants awakening to be free of obstacles, but Mara is part of the path. He is the tension that forces you to grow. He is the resistance that shapes your inner strength. Not because he is benevolent, but because your refusal to collapse in front of him reveals the depth of your practice.